Chapter 387. GOR Chapter 366 Clash. Are they going to remove us from our positions? Quite a number of people suddenly burst into an uproar. Some even deliberately raised their voices to rebuke and question. Shea saw all of this and simply looked on coldly without saying a word. At this time, Sharba stepped forward. This big man slammed the hammer in his hand onto the ground. Bang! He shouted in a low voice. Military meeting. The commanding general is right before you. Do you not have any military rules? If you make any more noise during the meeting, you will be punished. This big man was playing the good cop, but naturally there were also people playing the bad cop. Green revealed a faint smile as he raised his voice. Everybody, those officers who haven't been appointed for the time being will not be dismissed. Instead, they will be incorporated into the advisor department of the military headquarters of the theater of operations. All the ranks and treatments will be according to your positions, war zone military staff. Such a position will be transferred to a civilian position. Furthermore, he would not be able to lead troops from now on. After leaving the military camp, he would have no subordinates under him. He would not have his own trusted subordinate. Most importantly, there would be fewer ways to make money from now on. He would not be able to take empty pay, embezzle money, or play tricks with the military supplies. Most importantly, in this era where everything was about strength, he would not have any real power under him. Instead, he would only have the title of a staff officer with no real power. Who would care about him? Green's words did not calm these people down. Instead, more people began to clamor. Sir Shea, are you trying to strip us of our power? This is clearly swallowing us. Snatching military power. Lao Tzu's soldiers, why should they be given to you? I only know how to fight, I don't know how to work as a staff officer. Facing the crowd's anger, Green didn't get angry. Instead, he repeated his words twice. Seeing that everyone was still arguing, Sarba didn't hold back anymore. This fellow immediately strode forward and grabbed a 7th Corps officer who was stretching out his neck and shouting. Grabbing this person's neck, he raised his hand and threw this fellow out. A figure flew over everyone's head and crashed to the back with a bang. Sharba didn't stop there. He rushed into the crowd and knocked down a few more with a few punches and kicks. Finally, he grabbed one of them with each hand and pressed them to the ground. He cursed, "The commander is right in front of me. You bastards, how dare you cause a ruckus during a military meeting? Even if you were beaten to death, it wouldn't be considered much." The moment Sharba made his move, a few of the hot-tempered officers in the 7th Division were enraged. With a few swishes, a few of them pulled out their knives and shouted, "You dare to make a move? Good, you want to eat us today, don't you?" The Lao Tzu would not sit still and wait for death. "Brothers, let's fight! Let's fight! Let's fight!" One by one, they straightened their necks and shouted. But Xiaya, who was standing on top, could clearly see that although these guys were shouting fiercely, they were only stomping their feet and waving their swords. Not many of them really dared to move forward. Most of them were hiding in the crowd, only shouting and not really rushing forward. It could be assumed that they just wanted to use this kind of noisy crowd to pressure Shea into submission. Shea sneered. His eyes drifted to Jalunxier of the 6th Corps. Jalunxier, who had a big hooked nose, was cunning. He quickly pulled a few of his colleagues and retreated a few steps. Immediately, the officers of the 6th Corps shrank to the back, leaving only the people of the 7th Corps in the front. From this, it was clear that they were separated. Seeing Shea's sneer and somewhat sinister appearance, Reinhardt suddenly stepped forward. He rushed forward and knocked down an officer of the 7th Corps with a punch. Then, he snatched the knife from the officer's hand and shouted, "Everyone stop! Openly brandishing your knife during a military meeting. Threatening your superior, are you thinking of rebelling?" After saying that, he did not hesitate to stab his knife into the thigh of the guy he beat up. Instantly, the man screamed and blood flowed out. Hearing this scream and seeing blood, The others suddenly became quiet as they stared at Reinhardt with dumbfounded eyes. This guy, he really dared to make a move? After a short moment of shock, the officers of the 7th Corps said with cold faces, "Reinhardt, you are an outsider. This matter has nothing to do with you. Just stand aside." "Nothing to do with you? What a joke." Reinhardt raised his knife and shouted, "Since the military district has been established, I am the new staff officer of the 1st Corps in the north. All of you future staff officers are my subordinates. No matter what, I am an outsider. We are all soldiers of the Empire and belong to the northern war zone. Do you dare to disobey orders? Who dares to disobey orders? Stand up now. Lao Tzu will execute the military law. The Empire has decreed that those who disobey orders will be killed without mercy." Once these murderous words were spoken, the clamor immediately quieted down. Many people quietly shrank back. However, there were still a few hotheads who didn't want to give up. Someone straightened his neck and shouted, "What do you mean by disobeying orders? Lao Tzu does not recognize him as Shea Thunder. We are the officers of the 7th Corps. He can just dismiss us just because he wants to." Based on what? Lao Tzu's military position was conferred by the military. Shea Thunder does not have the authority to dismiss me. Before this guy could finish speaking, Reinhardt's face had already turned cold. He suddenly straightened his body and slashed down with his knife. Before that hothead could finish his words, Reinhardt's steel knife had already chopped down on his head. That guy could only let out a small scream before his head was chopped off in half. Blood and brain matter splattered all over the ground. Seeing that someone had been killed, everyone was shocked. Many of them who were still shouting earlier were now completely stunned. No one would have thought that Reinhardt would be so decisive in killing someone without any hesitation. Even Sharba was stunned. Although Sharba had already been ordered by Shea to play the good cop, he only dared to fight and did not dare to kill anyone. Reinhardt's blade was dripping with blood. He was still injured and his physical strength was not good. If he really fought, he would probably be at a disadvantage. However, at this moment, he stood there with his knife in front of him. Drops of blood flowed down the tip of the knife, and there was a corpse on the ground. This scene immediately caused everyone to feel a faint sense of fear towards this pale-faced young man. It was as if they were stunned. After a long while, someone finally came back to his senses and shouted while panting, "Reinhardt, what right do you have to kill? You. Even if he did something wrong, the military judge will punish him. You." Reinhardt's cold gaze immediately swept towards the person who spoke. That person could not help but take a step back when his gaze swept past him. Reinhardt said coldly, "Disobeying orders is a capital offense. I'm punishing him not because he disobeyed Sir Shea's orders. It's because this guy dared to disobey Sir Shea's appointment and the revocation of the 7th Division. That is openly disrespecting the imperial and military orders I brought from the imperial capital. Disobeying the imperial and military orders, I naturally have the right to kill him. And all of you, who dares to disobey the imperial and military orders, step forward." Everyone was intimidated by Reinhardt's imposing manner and was momentarily speechless. "Reinhardt." Shea finally spoke coldly, "Put away your knife and step back." Shea's voice was not loud. He slowly walked around the table and walked down. Reinhardt immediately retreated behind Shea and stood with his hands behind his back. Shea walked in front of the officers of the 7th Division and said coldly, "I can't be bothered to waste time with you. I only want to ask one thing, are you going to obey the orders?" "Sir Shea, you are trying to cut off our path. You are going too far. Isn't it just killing people? It's not like Lao Tzu hasn't seen blood before. Fight. Fight." After hearing those words, Shea's eyes flashed with disdain. "That means you are not going to obey the orders." As he spoke, he twisted his body and pressed forward. As soon as he moved, his body was like a gust of wind. Before the two men who were still holding military knives in their hands could react, Xiao was already in front of them. The two men were startled. Just as they raised their military knives, they heard two caw-caw sounds. Xiao had already stretched out his hands and pinched the two men's arms. With a light squeeze, the bones of the two men's arms immediately broke. The two men screamed and fell. Without waiting for the knives in their hands to fall to the ground, Xiao had already reached out with both hands to grab them. Then, he took 2 steps forward and used the back of his knife to hit the necks of the other 2 men. The 2 men immediately screamed and fell to the ground. Xiao had taken care of 4 men in an instant. The others were shocked and they all retreated. No one dared to raise their knives again. Xiao sneered. Suddenly, he flicked his wrists, and the 2 military knives in his hands suddenly broke into pieces and flew out. The 2 knife handles in his hands were directly thrown to the ground. A bunch of trash! Xiao held his head high and stared coldly at the officers of the 7th Division. I have taken care of you for a few months, but you fellows are still not satisfied. I did not even investigate the crime of neglecting to guard the territory. Yet, you fellows still want to maintain your position and be promoted. Despicable to this extent. Fine, you fellows want to settle the score, right? Then, let us settle it properly. He laughed and shouted, according to the Empire's military law, neglecting to guard the territory, what crime is that? No one answered. However, Ka-Tua, who had been standing at the back, smiled and said, My lord, according to the Empire's military law, if an army fails to guard the territory, the officers who die in battle will be compensated. As for those who escape, they will be stripped of their military rank and above and handed over to the military law for punishment. The lightest punishment is removal of their rank and title. The heaviest punishment is hanging. After hearing Ka-Tuo's words, the faces of these men turned ashen. Xiao sneered and said, Very well. If that is the case, if you fellows wish to continue to be officers of the 7th Division, then let us settle the crime of neglecting to guard the territory. That was an ironclad crime. No matter how these fellows from the 7th Division tried to quibble, there was no way they could evade this crime. The military of the Byzantine Empire was extremely strict. The duty of the 7th Division was to guard Ilton County. According to the Empire's military law, the 7th Division must fulfill their duty of guarding Ilton County. If Ilton County was to be lost, then the entire 7th Division must fight to the death. Without the order to retreat from the higher-ups, they were not allowed to leave the battlefield. Strictly speaking, the men of the 7th Division standing here were all deserters. The Empire's military law was strict and harsh. Although many of the Byzantine army were corrupt and the military law would not be enforced most of the time, if they were to be investigated, these fellows from the 7th Division were in the wrong. They had lost Ilton County and were being pursued by Odin's men. Instead of following the Empire's military law and fighting to the death, they chose to run away. Although they were forced to do so, they were still in the wrong if they were to be investigated by the Empire's military law. Xiao looked at the speechless crowd and indifferently said, You guys came to me. I provided you with food and fodder and fed you for a few months. That's enough. I didn't expect you guys to have such wishful thinking. I didn't investigate your crimes according to the military law. You can be considered as being especially kind, but you still want to be promoted and get rich. As an army, you lost your territory but did not repent. You don't want to go in. You don't want to work hard. You only want your own power and benefit. You fellows, very well. If that's the case, then don't even think about getting that staff officer position. Strip off your clothes and wait for the military law to punish you. His unyielding attitude made the faces of the men of the 7th Division turn ashen. They were speechless. Some of them began to regret, if they were to be investigated for losing their territory, none of them would get off easy. If that was the case, they might as well leave the army and become staff officers. That would be a dignified way of stepping down. With Xiao's order, a group of fully armed soldiers rushed in from outside the door and held the men of the 7th Division back with their swords and knives. Those with swords and knives in their hands, tie them up. Let the rest go for now, Shea ordered coldly. As soon as he said that, some of the men of the 7th Division quickly threw away their swords and knives and quickly retreated to the side. Only a few of the more stubborn ones refused to give in. They allowed the soldiers to take away their weapons and tie their arms behind their back. Shea thunder. By doing this, by taking over our 7th Division, aren't you afraid of causing a backlash? Humph, seizing military power is not something you can do. Without us officers, how are you going to control our soldiers? Shea laughed out loud. So this is what all of you are relying on? Humph, let me tell you, Lao Tzu has always looked down on all of you. Look at what kind of trash soldiers you have brought. If I were to rely on you to help me control the army, I am afraid that these trash, upon seeing Odin's men, would immediately run away. Let me tell you clearly, Lao Tzu's new army did not rely on you people. All of your men, throw them back into the recruit barracks and train them again. 7 to 8 men were tied up and taken away. The rest of the men of the 7th Division all stood at the side with bitter faces. When all of the soldiers in the hall were taken away, the men of the 7th Division had already been reduced by half. They looked at each other for a while and pushed out one of them. It was the officer who fought with Glenn Ciar at the logistics department that day. He came out to represent the men of the 7th Division and spoke to Shea. Master, we will submit and obey your orders. We are willing to listen to your orders. We have handed over our soldiers and will report to the strategy department, but the crime of losing our territory. Shea looked at him and knew that he was a tactful person who knew when to advance and retreat. His expression softened as he said indifferently, "The one who lost their territory is the 7th Division. Now that the 7th Division no longer exists, you are all officers of the Northern War Zone's strategy department. So the crime of the 7th Division will naturally not fall on your head." The officer's expression immediately relaxed and he quickly bowed. "I thank Master on behalf of everyone." Pausing for a moment, this officer's expression became somewhat gloomy. He smiled bitterly and said, "Sir, I know my own abilities. I am already grateful that you are willing to not pursue the responsibility of losing our territory. As for this staff officer position, I will personally resign from it. I am only a rough person. I really can't handle the administrative matters of the staff officer department. After this subordinate has handed over the military affairs, I hope that you will allow me to retire from the army." Shea smiled. This guy was really tactful. Originally, stuffing all of these people into the general staff department was also a last resort. Shea really didn't like any of these people. These trash, their ability to fight was not good, but their ability to cause trouble was not small. Stuffing them into the general staff department temporarily was just to appease the people's hearts a little. If it was really a war, how could Shea hope that these people would be able to come up with any strategy? Since they were willing to retire from the army, that was for the best. Shea immediately agreed and even comforted them with a few words. Seeing this situation, many others came forward one after another. Some said that they had been on the battlefield for many years and were burdened with old injuries. Some said that they were not talented enough to take on heavy responsibilities. In short, they all proposed to retire from the army, and Shea naturally approved all of them with a smile. The rest of the people from the 7th Corps almost all left in an instant. The remaining 2 or 3 people were still thinking about something, and there was still some hesitation on their faces. They probably still wanted to have a good life in the army. Since the voices of opposition had been eliminated, the following matters were easy to handle. Shea distributed the orders of appointment one by one, and then ordered the entire army to start reorganizing. After issuing the order of reorganization in the name of the Northern Military Region Headquarters, from that day onwards, Each army began to carefully clean up the organization from top to bottom. After the orders were issued and everyone left, Shea asked Reinhardt to stay behind alone. Just now, you acted very decisively. Shea looked at Reinhardt. It was unknown whether he was happy or angry. Reinhardt's expression was indifferent and he slowly said, "Some people will not be honest until they see blood. Annexation has always been a difficult thing to do peacefully. It always has to go through some intense process. I am just representing you to be the bad guy." Shea pondered for a moment and said, "In the future, you will need my orders to take action. Do not act without my permission." A strange look appeared in Reinhardt's eyes and he said, "Yes, I understand. There is more." Shea rubbed his chin and said, "I have been thinking about it. The army is still lacking a military judge. You are a cold and decisive fellow. You are a good candidate. Before I find a new candidate or before you die on the battlefield, you can hold the position of military judge. If you want to know what will happen next, please go to www.chidian.com. Support the author, support the original reading. Chapter 388. GOR Chapter 367 Congratulatory Gift Team Military Judge. Reinhardt's expression did not change. He simply cast a deep glance at Shea. After agreeing to it, he turned around and walked out of the hall. "This fellow, back in the academy, how did you train him?" Shea turned to look at Green. Green looked at the disappearing figure outside the door and frowned. Reinhardt, truth be told, back in a military academy, he was not too outstanding. However, he was quite meticulous. As for the other military strategy courses, he was not too outstanding. I did not expect this young man to display such talent the moment he joined the military. He is your student after all, however. If the Imperial Military Academy is filled with people like him, old Mad Dog, what other good students do you have? Help me recruit them. As you can see, we are severely lacking in manpower right now." Green narrowed his eyes and smiled. "Is that so? If I have too many students in the military, won't you be worried?" Shea was taken aback. Then, he smiled and looked at Green. "I may not be at ease with others, but with you, old Mad Dog, I am at ease." Green shook his head. "I fear it will be difficult to get people. Now that Austria is besieged, I don't have a way to get people from the military academy. As for the other students, let me think. It seems that some of the students who graduated a few years ago have been thrown to some place to idle. Maybe a few people can be found. I'll make a list later and write a letter. You can send someone with my letter to find them." Shea nodded his head. Green looked at Shea. Suddenly, his face sank and his expression became incomparably solemn. "Shea, I might as well be frank with you. That damned military order and imperial order, old Green, am well aware of what is going on. Unless the upper echelons of the Empire have lost their minds, they would not make such an outrageous appointment. However, given the present situation, the North needs a united group. We need a pillar to stand up and support this situation. That's why I didn't say anything. But that doesn't mean I don't have a bottom line. I hope you make good use of the power in your hands, and even more that you wholeheartedly serve the Empire and resist foreign enemies for the Empire, and don't have any ulterior motives. Otherwise, old Green, will be the first to fight you to the death." After saying that, Green did not look at Shea and directly strode out of the hall. Seeing Green walk out, Shea breathed a sigh of relief in his heart. When Reinhardt forged this order, he couldn't explain it to Green. Green was someone Shea relied heavily on. If he were to be estranged or held a grudge against this crazy old dog, then the loss would be unbearable for Shea. Now that Green had acquiesced, it was fine. The current situation did not allow Shea to waste too much time. Once the order for the reorganization of the army was issued, it was immediately put into action. Under the push of Green and a group of officers of the 6th Corps who had sided with Shea, the reorganization order was quickly carried out. Most of the officers of the 7th Corps were dismissed or put aside in the General Staff Department. Several senior officers handed in their resignations. Once the leaders left, the people below could not make any trouble even if they wanted to. Shea ordered that the more than 4,000 soldiers of the 7th Corps were to be strictly selected. Only 2,000 were selected, and they were considered to be qualified soldiers. They were to be incorporated into the 1st Corps of the Northern Theater of Operations, and the rest were thrown into the Garrison Corps. In Shea's plan, the new army would be formed into 2 corps. The 1st Corps of the Northern Theater of Operations would be his main fighting force, while the Garrison Corps would be a secondary force, mainly used for the defense of cities and territories. The 1st Corps of the Northern Theater of Operations would be 20,000 soldiers. The composition of the army would naturally be 4,000 roadrear cavalrymen and 2,000 horse bandit cavalrymen, forming an independent cavalry corps of 6,000 cavalrymen. This cavalry unit will be Shea's sharpest blade in terms of battle power. Because he was born in the roadrear cavalrymen, Shea had a natural infatuation and preference for cavalry. The 6,000 cavalrymen that he had gathered would be enough to form 2 emblem regiments. For an army of 20,000 soldiers, it was rare to see such a large number of cavalrymen in a mixed infantry and cavalry army. In fact, if conditions permitted, Shea wished he could directly form a cavalry corps. However, this idea was quickly dismissed by himself, Green and the rest. Shea could not bear the cost of forming a cavalry corps. Cavalry was one of the most expensive military units on land in this era. With Shea's current wealth and land of 1 county, it was impossible for him to support such an expensive army. Other than that, the other units of the 1st Corps were 6,000 men selected from the 6th Corps and 2,000 men from the 7th Corps, in addition to some new recruit. They formed 4 emblem regiments of infantrymen. In terms of battle, after taking in most of the qualified veterans from the 6th and 7th Corps and adding in a relatively small number of new recruits, this newly formed 1st Corps of the Northern Theater of Operations was not bad. With a little adjustment, they would be able to be used immediately. However, the Garrison Corps under Green's command was much weaker. This Garrison Corps was temporarily formed from the former members of the 6th and 7th Corps who were not used by the 1st Corps of the Northern Theater of Operations, a large number of new recruits, and some remnants of the original garrison troops. Out of the 15,000 men, the new recruits took up 80%. According to Green, this corps would not be equipped with the ability to fight in the field in the short term. At most, it could only be used as a defensive force to defend the city. The establishment of the new army, the allocation of various materials, the distribution of military equipment and other work piled up like a mountain. Suddenly, the Quartermaster General Ka-Tua was so tired that he almost stopped breathing. In just 3 days, he had lost a lot of weight. He no longer had the time to hide in his luxurious and comfortable logistics camp and enjoy life. Even Shea was busy with the reorganization of the army. He spent most of his time in the 1st Corps camp every day, eating and living with the middle and low-ranking officers. After that, he would patrol the training grounds. He even spent an hour every day training with the cavalry. These actions caused Sharba to feel somewhat resentful. In the words of this hot-headed youth, "Sir Shea is simply snatching my job. I am the commander of the cavalry corps." The entire Denzel city had become a huge military camp. Both inside and outside the city, the camps were in full swing. Additionally, the city had also set up a recruitment center for new recruit. Under Green's supervision, the recruitment of reserve soldiers was carried out within the city. Fortunately, there was a large number of refugees within Denzel City. Due to the invasion of the Odin's people, they had lost their homes. Thus, they were very enthusiastic about joining the army to fight against the Odin's people. Every day, long queues could be seen at the recruitment center for new recruit. However, due to this, the money in Shea's treasury was being spent like water. A few days later, Ka-Tua came looking for Shea with a frown on his face. If we continue to spend like this, I fear we won't even be able to make it to next year's spring. There was a helpless look on Ka-Tuo's face. Everything else is still manageable. The soldiers' salaries can be distributed once a season. We also have enough food. However, there is one problem that I cannot solve. Looking into Shea's eyes, Ka-Tua gritted his teeth and said, "War horses. We lack war horses. We need a large number of war horses." The Rodrier cavalry had arrived. However, the 4,000 cavalrymen brought with them less than 500 war horses. The rest were mostly mules or horses. Of the 2,000 cavalrymen in the city, the number of war horses was just enough. As a result, the 6,000 cavalrymen only had less than 3,000 war horses. On average, 2 cavalrymen could share one war horse. During training, everyone could take turns riding the war horses. However, what about during battle? I'm not a magician. I can't make war horses appear out of thin air. Ka-Tua complained to Shea. There's also the cavalry's armor and weapons. We can't let the cavalrymen wear infantry's armor and wield infantry's swords, right? We lack armor, lances, sabers and shields. The county of Moor does not produce iron ore. Even if we have craftsmen, we don't have iron ore to forge weapons. Let's do our best. Shea expressed his helplessness towards this problem. Fortunately, according to the information we have now, at least before winter, Manninger will not have the energy to turn around and deal with us. I heard that he is already organizing a major battle in an attempt to defeat the Corsicans' main force in one fell swoop. However, before winter, he will not be able to achieve this goal. We can only pray that the Corsicans can hold on for a few more days. Before that, we still have time to gather equipment and horses. Have the people we sent to Wildfire Town returned? There may still be some merchant groups in Wildfire Town who can get a lot of materials that are in short supply, although the price is a little expensive. I heard that they can get a batch of iron this time. The person who went to Wildfire Town to purchase iron was Nene. It seemed that she wanted to stay away from Denzel City. It was unknown whether she wanted to avoid Shea or the terrible Merlin. However, there was still good news. Just before the end of the month, the city of Metter finally paid the first tax since Shea took office, although the amount was really small. After all, after the destruction of the war, as the largest city in the county of Moor, Metter was no longer as prosperous as it used to be. Fortunately, the people of the county of Moor were still quite united. They knew that Lord Shea was training the army to protect their homeland against the Odin. Therefore, when the tax was paid, almost no one complained. Even if the difficulty was great, they still gritted their teeth and paid the tax. It was said that some merchant groups in the city even organized a donation drive. In addition, the people of Metter City also spontaneously organized a team of 500 volunteer soldiers and came to Denzel City. The quality of these soldiers who volunteered to join the army was quite good, and they were incorporated into the First Corps by Shea. With so much work, time passed very quickly. Shea ate and lived in the barracks almost all day. He no longer had time to go to the city to visit Uria. Naturally, he also did not go back to the county lord's mansion to see Merlin's face. Only God knew what Merlin was doing. It seemed that in the blink of an eye, more than half a month had passed. Shea's group, including Green and the others, had lost a lot of weight. Every day, as soon as everyone opened their eyes, they would be faced with countless work. These busy and tense days, however, made the group exude a kind of exuberant vitality. Everyone was working energetically. Seeing the framework of the new corps being built little by little, the new army becoming more and more like it, Shea's heart was slightly relaxed. Now, even if Manninger were to come again, Lao Tzu would at least have the ability to fight him, right? the countless merchant groups with complicated backgrounds on the black streets of Wildfire Town finally sent over some good news. Nene had obtained tens of carriages of iron ore and over 300 warhorses from Wildfire Town. To Shea's surprise, where did these things come from? After these goods were transported to Denzel City, Shea was even more surprised. Those warhorses and iron ore, a considerable portion of them were clearly transported over from the Odin Empire. Those black-hearted merchant groups in Wildfire Town really had a lot of hidden power. At the end of the month, Dax finally did some work that was worthy of the salary Shea was paying him. In the past 20 days, Dax brought along the men assigned to him by Alfracat and Shea and quietly left Moore County. It was unknown where he went, but when he returned, he brought along a merchant group. This merchant group with the emblem of the Gallants Chamber of Commerce had come from the southwest. It was unknown what kind of ability they had used to travel all the way from the area occupied by the Odin Empire. This large merchant group of several hundred people had brought with them nearly 200 carriages of various goods, including the arrows and medicinal herbs that Shea was in dire need of. These items were all exchanged for Zaku's gold in Denzel City. Shea could not help but quietly pull Dax to the side and carefully interrogate him. Where did so many people come from? From the southwest, Dax blinked. Wasn't the county in the west occupied by the Odin Empire's army? I heard that it was the army of the Odin Empire. How did you pass through their territory? Dax squinted his eyes and smiled. He stretched out 2 fingers and held a shiny gold coin between them. Bribe, my lord. Dax smiled and replied, there is no path, but we can use money to make a path. Although the Odin Empire is a barbaric race, there are also greedy people among them. There are greedy people in any race. As long as we are patient and find what they like, there will always be a gap that we can take advantage of. In addition, Dax also brought along a piece of information that made Shea feel at ease. The Odin Empire's army in the west is no longer a threat to us for the time being. Several local resistance groups have appeared in the west. Those fellows are very smart. They have engaged in guerrilla warfare against the Odin Empire's army, constantly harassing the villages and towns where the Odin Empire's army is weak. This has tied up a lot of the Odin Empire's energy. I have also obtained reliable information that the eldest son of the divine Emperor Odin, the crown prince of the Odin Empire, is heading to the front lines from within the empire. That is, he is heading to the army of the Odin Empire in the west. Thus, before the crown prince's arrival, that army will not make any big movements. We can rest easy for now. That piece of information allowed Shea to breathe a sigh of relief. The next day, something else happened that disrupted Shea's plans in Denzel City. The mounted scouts returned to report that a strange group of people had come from the north. They had entered the territory of the county of Moore through the wildfire and were heading toward Denzel City. The group consisted of 200 to 300 people. Additionally, the mounted scouts also brought back a shocking piece of news. That is a group of dwarves. That is right. I am not mistaken. I swear to God, that is a group of dwarves. They are carrying huge hammers and driving strange iron carts. The ones pulling the carts are not horses. Instead, they are strange subterranean beasts with large bodies and short heads. As they were running, they would constantly roar like cows. Dwarves? Shea and the others were stunned. Why would a group of dwarves, numbering in the hundreds, suddenly come to Denzel City? However, the mounted scout quickly took the initiative to provide the answer. Our men tried to force their way forward, but they quickly sent someone to contact us. Those dwarves speak Byzantium badly. However, we were able to figure it out. They said, what did they say? They said. The mounted scout looked at Shea and said, they are here to send a congratulatory gift. To be continued. If you want to know what will happen next, please go to www.chidian.com. There are more chapters. Support the author, support the original reading. Chapter 389. GOR Chapter 368. The second team. That night, the team of hundreds of dwarves finally arrived at the outskirts of Denzel City. The arrival of a team of dwarves would naturally cause a great deal of surprise. In order to not cause chaos or panic, Shea had specially dispatched a team of 100 cavalrymen to watch over this team of dwarves and lead them into the city. At the same time, they cleared the path to avoid any chaos caused by too many onlookers. The dwarves could be said to be one of the most unique races on this continent. Firstly, the relationship between the dwarves and humans was not too good. It could even be said that it was somewhat bad. The dwarves lived in the blue basin of the wildfire plains. They did not like to interact with humans. Thus, humans were generally unable to enter or even approach the blue basin. The dwarves were naturally outstanding craftsmen. The weapons and armors they forged were always the most expensive treasures on the continent. However, the difficulty of obtaining a piece of equipment forged by the dwarves was enough to cause 99% of the people to feel discouraged. The dwarves were xenophobic by nature. Towards any other race that entered their territory, they would treat them with hostility. Anyone who dared to rashly enter the dwarves' territory would be attacked by the dwarves. Additionally, the fighting strength of this race was also astonishing. The dwarves were born with extraordinary strength. Even the female, elderly and underage dwarves of the dwarves were far stronger than a strong human youth. These dwarves with great strength and thick bodies were accustomed to using iron hammers as weapons. Ordinary human warriors would find it difficult to withstand a single blow from a dwarf's hammer. According to legend, in the human world, only a very small number of merchants who had obtained the approval of the dwarves or established a relationship of trust with the dwarves could enter the dwarves' territory at certain times to conduct limited transactions with the dwarves. This made it so that any item crafted by the dwarves could easily be sold for a sky-high price on the continent. Disregarding everything else, Hastings's tri-edged war spear was the best weapon produced by the dwarves. When this team of dwarves entered the city, Shea also ran outside the city to observe. From afar, this team of hundreds of dwarves had over 200 large carriages. The design of these dwarves' carriages was very different from human carriages. The bodies of these dwarves' carriages were very low. The wheels were at most 1/3 the height of ordinary carriages. The bodies of these carriages were wider and longer. Additionally, each carriage had at least 8 wheels. The ones pulling the carriages were not horses or mules. Instead, they were a special type of animal raised by the dwarf. It was called the subterranean beast. These subterranean beasts somewhat resembled dragons, of course. Dora expressed her dissatisfaction and protest towards Shea's conclusion. In Dora's opinion, associating a lowly creature like the subterranean dragon race with the noble dragon race was a blasphemy to the dragon race. However, Shea still felt that he was right. These subterranean beasts really did look like dragons, but they were much smaller. They didn't have wings, their necks were shorter, and their legs were thicker and shorter. Subterranean subterranean, subterranean subterranean, subterranean beasts, subterranean subterranean beasts, subterranean beasts, subterranean 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 subterra beasts. Although they weren't very fast, these subterranean beasts had an extremely powerful trait: they were extremely good at carrying heavy loads. A single subterranean beast could carry up to several thousand kilograms of weight. This was something that horses definitely couldn't do. It wasn't that humans didn't know about the subterranean beast's outstanding ability to carry heavy load. Unfortunately, up until now, apart from the dwarves, no other race had been able to successfully tame them. It was unknown how the dwarves had managed to tame them. These subterranean beasts looked docile, but they were actually very irascible. It was only under the command of the dwarves that they became as docile as a sheep. However, any experienced demon hunter of the wildfire plains knew how terrifying these creatures were. These subterranean beasts had an innate ability to use earth magic. They could gather enough earth element on the surface of their bodies, allowing their bodies to become as hard as rock for a short period of time. Blades and swords couldn't harm them. Even a mid-ranked warrior would find it difficult to penetrate their bodies with his do-chi. However, these subterranean beasts were docile and obedient in the hands of the dwarves. Looking at this group of 200 carts, there were more than 200 subterranean beasts pulling them. These low-ranked magic beasts had gray or black skin, and they had large metal rings around their necks. The chains were hooked to the carts behind them, and they pulled the fully loaded carts forward step by step. Some of the subterranean beasts even raised their heads from time to time as they walked, letting out loud cries. Compared to these subterranean beasts, Shea was more interested in the dwarves in this group. In Shea's eyes, these fellows were indeed very short. Most of the dwarves were about the same height as the goblins, or even slightly shorter. However, the dwarves were much thicker than the goblins. There were at least 400 dwarves in this group, and almost every one of them was abnormally strong. Although they were short, they had broad shoulders, thick arms, and legs that were as thick as tree trunks. They looked just like short lumps of iron. All the dwarves had one thing in common: they all had long beards. Most of them had beards that reached their waists, and a few of them even reached their toes. Their beards were braided into different kinds of fancy braids, just like human women's hair. However, many of the dwarves' heads were bald. They were all wearing black iron armor, which looked pitch black and even gave off a somewhat crude feeling. This made Shea somewhat disappointed. He thought that since the dwarves were the best craftsmen in the legends, then the armor they made for themselves should be of superior quality. How come these guys were wearing pitch black and unremarkable things? But he noticed one thing: the armor on these dwarves was thick iron armor. Such iron armor was probably not light. Almost every dwarf was carrying a strange big hammer, and the top of these hammers had something like a sharp spear tip. What do you think is in these big carriages that they brought? Dora could not help but ask with a smile. Shea pursed his lips and said, "How would I know? I have not seen many dwarves. But I've heard that the dwarves have very strange appearances. Even their women have long beards and speak in a coarse voice, just like men." Shea's expression suddenly became a little strange. Women with long beards? After this group of hundreds of dwarves arrived outside the city, they stopped, making things difficult for the cavalrymen who escorted them along the way. Shea saw that the group stopped outside the city, and immediately led his men to meet them. He saw the captain of the cavalrymen, who was in charge of escorting the group of dwarves, quickly riding in front of him to report. "Sir, these dwarves are not willing to enter the city. They insist on seeing you first." "They are not willing to enter the city?" Shea frowned. "Why?" The captain of the cavalrymen was also at a loss. Shea wanted to say something, but Dora spoke up in his mind. "I know, and little Shea, you don't have to guess. These dwarves are indeed not going to enter the city. This is a tradition of the dwarves, or rather, a rule." "A rule! And it is a rule." Dora's voice seemed a little strange. Since the ancient war, various races and humans have fallen out. Among them, the dwarves and humans have some grudges. The ancestors of the dwarves left behind a will: no dwarves are allowed to enter human cities. Dwarves are a race that respects traditions very much. Thus, they will not violate this ancient rule. "I see." Shea rubbed his nose and said, "Then, let's arrange for them to live outside the city." Let them live outside the barracks. Isn't our old barracks in the new military city empty? We can let them live there temporarily." After saying that, Shea passed the order to the captain of the cavalrymen. Then, Shea pondered for a moment before frowning. "Well, let's go see these dwarves and see what they came to deliver." To be honest, Shea was also very curious. These dwarves showed a very cooperative attitude. They were quickly led by the cavalrymen to live in the veteran barracks outside the city. This veteran barracks was built on the foundation of the garrison army's barracks. During the first siege by Odin, it was burned down. Later, it was repaired and new recruits were trained here. After Shea established the new army half a month ago, the 1st Division was established. The army was pulled to the newly established barracks, leaving this place empty. Frankly speaking, the conditions here were very simple. There were only some empty barracks left. Most of them were built by burning earth. But the dwarves didn't seem to be dissatisfied with this simple living conditions. After they settled in, they parked the 200 carriages at the entrance of the camp. A third of the dwarves went to untie the subterranean beasts that were pulling the carriages. Then the dwarves began to herd the subterranean beasts around the camp. Many of the dwarves carried large sacks from the carriages and poured out some unknown food to feed the subterranean beasts. There were also some dwarves who used strange large brushes to brush the subterranean beasts. The subterranean beasts seemed to enjoy the brushing. Many of them were even rolling around on the ground in comfort. By the time Shea arrived, the dwarves had already occupied several sentry posts in the barrack. Seeing Shea's arrival, many of the dwarves had a look of vigilance on their faces. Their gazes were definitely not friendly. In fact, there was even a hint of hostility. "I am the leader of Denzel City. Get your leader to come see me." Shea stood at the entrance of the barracks and didn't enter. Probably because they understood Shea's words, the leader of the dwarves soon arrived in front of Shea. The dwarf standing in front of Shea was only slightly taller than Shea's navel. But the dwarf was wearing a tall iron helmet that barely reached Shea's chest. However, that pair of short legs was still wearing a pair of long leather boots. It looked like the tops of the boots were almost at the base of its thighs. It looked a little ridiculous. Shea noticed that although the dwarf's figure was short, he was extremely sturdy. His skin was as dry and thick as the bark of an old tree. It was full of wrinkles, but the muscles on his chest and arms were well defined. The most ridiculous thing was that his beard was the longest among the dwarves. It reached all the way to his toes. His long beard was woven into 2 beautiful knots. There were also more than a dozen small braids. These dwarves appeared dark and dirty. But unexpectedly they were so meticulous in taking care of their beard. "My name is Rock. I have been entrusted by the omnipotent and great King Greybeard to deliver a gift to the great Sir Merlin." The dwarf leader looked at Shea. His voice was somewhat hoarse and his tone was somewhat arrogant. But these dwarves' voices were really loud. Their voices were like rumbling thunder. Rock. What a strange name. Shea seemed to have heard a lot of legends. It seemed that the dwarves would always have names like Rock or Hammer. It was just like the human names of Tom and Jack. "I welcome you on behalf of Sir Merlin." Shea's voice was somewhat arrogant. This was his temperament. Since this dwarf's tone was not polite, Shea did not need to show any kindness. "But Sir Merlin can't see you now. So, you can tell me the reason why you're here, and then you can tell me whatever you want." "No, no, no." Rock repeatedly shook his head. "I have brought a precious gift from Greybeard King to Sir Merlin. I have to personally hand it over. I can't let others receive it." Shea rolled his eyes. Want to see Merlin? Then there was no other way. Merlin had locked himself in the backyard and hung a sign outside the door. "Intruders will die." Whoever has the guts can go in. In any case, Lao Tzu is not going in. Shea frowned. "Sir Merlin doesn't have time to see you now. If you don't want to hand it over, then you can just wait here." After a pause, Shea said, "Who did you say you came on behalf of? Greybeard King?" "Greybeard King. The dwarf race's king of kings. The dwarf race's His Majesty the Supreme King, the leader deeply loved by all dwarves. The bravest and most heroic dwarf hero." Rock suddenly became excited, as if he had been injected with chicken blood. "Enough." Shea waved his hand and looked at this guy who was spitting saliva everywhere. Looks like I can call Todoro over to receive these guys." When this dwarf talked about Greybeard King, he kept talking about horses. He was somewhat similar to Todoro. If they were together, they would definitely have a common language. Seeing that they couldn't reach an agreement, Xiya took his people and left. Before leaving, he curiously looked at the camp. The 200 large carriages were tightly covered, and he didn't know what kind of treasures they were. Just as Xiya brought people back from the stronghold and was walking back, there were already a few riders galloping over from a distance. From afar, he could clearly see that it was his subordinates' team of scout cavalry. Sir Xiya. Urgent military situation. Hearing the shouts from afar, Xiaya's expression immediately turned cold. But soon after, the cavalrymen rushed in front of him and shouted while still on their horses, "Sir, there's another strange team coming from the east. They. What are you panicking for? What they? Xiaya's face darkened. As a scout, one of the most important qualities was to remain calm despite being shocked. If one was so easily flustered, how could one become a scout? But then, the words of this cavalry scout immediately explained the reason for his panic. Those guys, they came from the sky. More than a dozen big birds. They are riding on people and are coming from the east. They are less than 30 miles from here. Riding birds? People? Xiya immediately opened his eyes wide. In his mind, Dora suddenly shouted, "It's the elves! It's the elves!" To be continued. If you want to know what will happen next, please go to www.chidian.com. There are more chapters. Support the author, support the original reading. Chapter 390. GOR Chapter 369. Country bumpkins wore robes. The group of bird riders that the mounted scouts had discovered were located 30 li east of the city. However, when the scout ran back to report, tens of black dots had appeared in the sky. Next, the black dots in the sky quickly grew bigger. Bit by bit, they became clearer. Then, the tens of black dots slowly descended and Xiya was able to clearly see those were not bird riders. Up in the sky, the tens of black dots transformed into tens of human silhouettes. From afar, the silhouettes of these human silhouettes appeared humanoid. However, each of them had a pair of translucent, snow-white wings on their backs. The length of the pair of wings was astonishing. Judging by the size of the human silhouettes, when the pair of wings were spread out, it would likely be close to 3 meters in length. With the pair of wings spread out in the sky, they resembled a large bird spreading its wings and soaring through the air. When the tens of flying human silhouettes approached Denzel City, they slowly descended and finally landed outside the city. Soon, a group of mounted soldiers moved forward to surround the group of birdmen. Due to the fact that the group of birdmen could fly, many of the mounted soldiers raised their bows and crossbows as they vigilantly surrounded the group of birdmen. Xiya quickly led his men over. By the time he arrived, a group of cavalrymen had already formed a circle. Dozens of lances were pointed at the silhouettes in the middle of the circle. The cavalrymen were fully equipped with armor and helmet. Their faces were covered with iron masks, and their expressions could not be seen clearly. However, their eyes were flashing with a cold light and murderous intent. These cavalrymen were reformed from the former Roadrear cavalrymen. Each and every one of them was an outstanding warrior with unswerving determination. Therefore, even though the appearance of these people who descended from the sky was exceedingly bizarre, these cavalrymen possessed excellent mental fortitude that allowed them to remain calm. They resolutely carried out their duties and vigilantly pointed their weapons at these uninvited guests. When Xiya arrived, the two sides were in the middle of a confrontation. Clearly, both sides were restraining themselves and no conflict broke out. On the other hand, the dozen or so people in the circle seemed to be more relaxed. They didn't make any other moves. Instead, they carefully gathered together and held thin daggers in their hands, waiting calmly for something. When Xiya arrived, the cavalry immediately opened up a path for Xiya. "Everyone, release your combat stance." After Xia's firm command, under the command of the leading officer, the forest of cavalry spears were neatly laid down. The cavalrymen collectively retreated a distance away before rapidly assembling into a formation. Shea slowly urged his horse forward and shouted, "I am the commander of Denzel City, the Minister of Northern Military Affairs of the Byzantine Empire. Please state the purpose of your visit." As he stepped forward, he carefully sized up these guests who had descended from the sky. The dozen or so people in front of him were dressed in extraordinarily luxurious attire. Or rather, it would be more appropriate to address them as they. Although he was unable to determine if they were humans or elves like Dora had said, he could at least determine that these dozen or so guests were all females. They were all wearing battle skirts that resembled flower petals. Every one of them had a tall and slender figure. Their well-proportioned bodies gave them an air of elegance. Their upper bodies were all covered in tight-fitting short shirts and breastplates. However, the shape of each breastplate was different. Almost every breastplate was engraved with various fancy and beautiful patterns. Shea had never seen so many luxurious armors before. The magnificence of the armors and the complex and beautiful patterns engraved on the surface of the armors had practically transformed the armors into works of art. That was especially true when the armors were worn by these tall and slender figures. They were filled with charm. However, in the eyes of a veteran warrior like Shea, he could not help but feel somewhat out of place. The armors of these fellows were beautiful to the extreme. However, the overly beautiful armors made Shea frown. The function of the armors was to protect the body of the warrior from being harmed by the enemy's weapons. Therefore, in Shea's understanding, the thicker and harder the armors should be. However, the armors worn by these fellows, those engraved patterns had almost carved out the good armors. Many places had almost become translucent decorations. Such fragile beauty was simply as thin as paper. Shea even suspected that such exquisite armors could not even withstand a real attack. Beautiful, however, too fragile. This was Shea's first impression. The owners of these luxurious armors were standing there, but they were also curiously looking at Shea. There were a total of 12 women in front of him. Those luxurious armors subtly accentuated the perfect curves of their bodies. Their slender legs were exposed under their battle skirts. Even their waists and navels were exposed. Those slender and snow-white waists were dazzling to the eye. Shea had never seen so many women with such outstanding figures gathered together in one place in his entire life. These 12 women all had slender and straight legs, slender and moving waists, and the alluring curves under their breastplate. As for the helmets they wore, they were even more unique. Each of the helmets were like exquisite hats worn on their head. They were shaped like crescent moons, with thin golden threads winding around them on both sides. They were small and unique, extremely beautiful. However, no matter how one looked at them, they did not look like helmets. These 12 women all had extremely exquisite facial features. It was as though their faces had been blessed by the gods since birth, giving them the most perfect proportion and combination. Every one of them was exceptionally beautiful. In particular, one of them was particularly outstanding. This was a woman with a head full of pale blonde hair. Among the 12 of them, she was the only one who was slightly different from the others. The others only had 7 petals on their battle skirt. Only her battle skirt had 9 petals, all of which were inlaid with gold. Various beautiful patterns were carved on it. Her appearance was also the most outstanding among the 12 of them. She had a pair of azure blue eyes, but the pupils were a rare golden color. Her eyes were long and slender, her nose was high, and the contours of her face were soft. However, the radiance radiating from her eyes made her entire person appear more heroic. A pair of clean knee-length boots. Shea noticed that she had a small and exquisite bow on her waist. The bowstring glowed with a faint silver color. She also had a quiver on her back. The arrowhead of the quiver was silver in color. This woman was clearly the leader of these 12 people. She was surrounded by the people around her, and her temperament was clearly more noble and reserved. When Shea rode his horse over, this woman was also carefully sizing up Shea. Her gaze contained a sense of scrutiny. After Shea finished speaking, the woman faintly smiled and slowly stepped forward. She placed one hand on her chest and slightly bowed as a salute. She opened her mouth and said in a somewhat hoarse and magnetic voice, "Respected Sir Commander, please accept my and my subordinates' greetings. We have come from the distant Chaos territory and have brought our tribe's friendship and kind greetings." Shea noticed that when this woman bowed, her pale blonde hair cascaded down like a golden waterfall, and beneath her hair, a pair of slender and pointy ears could be seen. An elf. As expected, she was an elf. Normal humans definitely wouldn't have such pointy ears. Shea was immediately intrigued. He couldn't help but stare at her ears for a while. Because he had never seen such a beautiful woman with such long ears, Shea's gaze couldn't help but become a bit more unbridled. As for the beautiful woman with the pale blonde hair, when she sensed Shea's gaze, her face couldn't help but flash with a hint of dissatisfaction. But this hint of dissatisfaction was fleeting and quickly disappeared. She still stood there quietly, staring at Shea. "All right, stop looking. Staring at her ears is a very impolite action according to the traditions of the elven race." Dora's reminder in his mind caused Shea to immediately come back to his senses. He coughed once, then said in a low voice, "Anarchic lands? That's tens of thousands of kilometers away from here. You are elves?" The pale blonde woman smiled faintly. Her smile contained a hint of pride and arrogance. "That's right. We are elves from the Anarchic lands, the New Moon tribe. Sir, may I ask if Lord Merlin is currently in the city? We have received orders from our tribe elders to come pay our respects to Lord Merlin." Merlin, the corners of Shea's eyes couldn't help but twitch. What the hell, these elves? It seemed they had also come to give Lao Tzu a wedding gift. That crazy bitch Merlin, what a great honor. Both dwarves and elves were involved. This Lord Merlin is currently occupied with important matters and is unable to meet with guests. If you have anything to say, please tell me. Shea sighed. In order to prevent the other party from rejecting him, he simply said bluntly, "Merlin is my adoptive mother. I think if you have anything to say, you can tell me." The eyes of the beautiful woman with the pale blonde hair immediately lit up. She looked at Shea with curiosity and interest. But soon, a hint of disappointment appeared in her eyes. Although this disappointment was quickly hidden, it was still caught by Shea. "Sir, are you Mr. Shea Thunder?" The expression of the beautiful woman with the pale blonde hair immediately became strange. "Honorable Lord Merlin's foster son? The host of the upcoming wedding?" "You can say that." Shea's expression was always unpleasant when it came to the wedding. Please accept the blessings of my tribe." The female elf with the pale blonde hair smiled reservedly. "My name is Vivian, and I'm the messenger of blessings sent by the tribe. I've brought you our tribe's blessings, as well as a precious gift. Lord Merlin is our tribe's most respected friend. As for your appearance as Lord Merlin, our tribe's elders have asked me to bring you our tribe's most precious gift for your wedding." After saying that, she raised a finger, and the group of elves behind her each placed a small bundle on their backs. "Gift?" Shea couldn't help but mutter. "They're all gift givers." The dwarves brought gifts in a long caravan, making those sturdy subterranean beasts gasp for breath. "But you elves only brought a few small bundles? These elves are too stingy," the female elf continued. "This is a battle robe. It's woven from the tail feathers of the precious multicolored flamingo birds. The best weavers of the tribe gathered silk from spirit spiders, and the best 9-colored iris flowers' flower juice was added to it." However, Shea had little interest in the other party's words, battle robe. Shea couldn't help curling his lip. If he hadn't seen these elves, he might have been interested, but battle robe? Just look at the armors these elves are wearing. Each and every one of them is just for show. How much value can the battle robes they make be worth? I'm afraid they could be pierced with a needle. Seeing that Shea didn't seem eager, the female elf smiled and said, Well, it's a bit impolite to talk about gifts now, so please arrange for our accommodations. In order to maximize the effect of this gift, the 9-colored iris flower's flower juice needs to go through the final process. In order to deliver the gift before your wedding, I've brought the best weavers of the tribe to settle them down. They'll be done in 3 to 5 days, and should be able to make it in time for your wedding. Shea didn't think much of it, but he didn't want to slap a smiling face. They were here to deliver gifts, so he had to be a bit more enthusiastic. He immediately said politely, Well, of course I'll have to ask you to settle down first. I just don't know if you have any requirements for a place to settle down? Pausing for a moment, he smiled and said, To be honest, before you came, our dwarven friends had just arrived. When we were settling them down, they said that they didn't want to enter the city. So we had to ask them to stay in a camp outside the city. If you don't want to enter the city, then perhaps we can ask you to stay with our dwarven friends. When the other party heard this, she seemed to be slightly startled. Then, this female elf smiled reservedly and said lightly, We don't have any concerns about entering the city. However, we can forget about living together with the dwarves. You may not know this, but we elves don't have a good relationship with the dwarves. It's better for everyone to live further away. Bad relationship? Shea thought for a moment and said, Then, please enter the city. The female elf smiled and added, If it's not too much trouble, please arrange for us to stay in a place with trees and a pool. We elves are a peace-loving race. Your Excellency's city is filled with the murderous aura of battle, which will make our people feel a little uncomfortable. They still need a comfortable environment before they can work. After all, the battle robe that I gave you still needs to go through the final process. Trees and a pool? Shea pursed his lips. The requirements were not low. There were some in his own mansion, but the backyard was already occupied by Merlin. As for other places, there were some in Uria's house, but he would never let that pregnant Uria move. Besides, Daphne also lived there. After the molestation incident, that night, Shea did not dare to face Her Majesty the Queen again. As for other places, there were trees and pools. The country bumpkin sighed and turned to a messenger beside him and said, Quickly go to the city and see Sir Lao Tzu. Tell him that his comfortable camp has been temporarily requisitioned by Lao Tzu. Tell him to pack up his things and go to the cavalry camp with me for a few days. The female elf called Vivian heard that and smiled gently. She bowed to Shea and said, Thank you very much. Sir Shea, now that you have a comfortable environment, the weavers I've brought with me are the best of the best in our tribe. They will definitely make the best battle robes for you. Shea didn't think much about the battle robe made by the elves. Hearing the other party's thanks, he just smiled and casually waved his hand. Well, I won't say any more polite words. Please follow my people into the city. The situation just now was unclear. My people were a little rude, please don't take offense. Shea looked at them and couldn't help but ask, The anarchic lands are tens of thousands of kilometers away from here. It seems like you just flew here? How come your wings are gone? Vivian pursed her lips and smiled. Those are wings of the wind. They aren't real wings, but rather a type of elven magic. Each use requires a lot of precious materials and magic power. For the sake of this mission, the elders of our tribe bestowed upon each of us 2 pairs of wings of the wind. They're only enough for us to use on a round trip. Normally, we can't use them as we please. Otherwise, my people would have to walk across the entire continent to return home. Wings of the wind? That's a good thing. A distance of tens of thousands of kilometers was covered in just a few days, good stuff. And when used, the beautiful pair of wings on the back would be very eye-catching. Shea felt a bit of yearning. Lao Tzu didn't care about the battle robes, but if he could get a few hundred pairs of these wings of the wind for Lao Tzu, that would be a good thing. Thinking to this point, he suddenly had a thought. He looked at Vivian and said, "Your Excellency's Byzantium is quite good. Are you elves also proficient in our human language?" Vivian smiled and calmly said, "Elves are an intelligent race. Our learning abilities are very strong. As for your language, it was Sir Merlin who taught me. In the past, Sir Merlin had once roamed our tribe for a period of time, and I was fortunate enough to receive some pointers from Sir Merlin. Thus, you could say that I am Sir Merlin's student." Merlin's student? Shea couldn't help but look at this female elf with pity in his eyes. Maybe you will have a common language with Todoro. However, after becoming Merlin's student, she didn't die from Merlin's torture. She also didn't suffer a mental breakdown. This female elf is not simple. On the way into the city, this female elf by the name of Vivian stopped talking. She seemed to lack interest in talking to Shea, from the proud expression that occasionally appeared on her face. If not for the fact that Shea was Merlin's adopted son, this proud elf would not even bother to talk to a country bumpkin like Shea. On the way, Shea heard Dora, who had been silent for a long time, suddenly let out a sigh in his mind. What a big deal! These elves are really generous. It seems that Merlin must have done them a great favor back then. What? Shea covered his mouth and asked in a low voice. That battle robe. You idiot who doesn't know what's good for you. Dora's tone was filled with hatred. The tail feathers of the rainbow flamingo, the spider silk of the spirit spider, and the nectar of the 9-colored iris flower. Almighty dragon god above! How much did Merlin do to this elven tribe back then? Very, very good? How good is it? Shea immediately became spirited. Even Dora, this harsh and sarcastic female dragon, exclaimed in surprise. It seemed it was no small matter. Humph! How good! You wouldn't understand even if I told you. I'll only tell you that in the past, the patriarch of the Black Dragon clan, in order to ask for a battle robe for his eldest son, sent an emissary to the anarchic territory to find an elven tribe and ask for a battle robe. Moreover, the materials weren't as good as yours. Especially the feathers of the rainbow flamingo. They didn't use tail feathers and only asked for ordinary feathers. And the spider silk of the spirit pearl wasn't used either. They only used gold essence silk made by the elves. As for the nectar of the 9-colored iris flower, don't even think about it. The 9-colored iris flower is the holy flower of the elves. It only blossoms once every 100 years. Every time it blossoms, it can only produce a small bottle of nectar. But in the past, when the patriarch of the Black Dragon clan asked for a battle robe, he sent an emissary who said that he was willing to exchange it for a piece of 10,000-year ice essence gold from the extreme north that weighed more than 300 pounds. But the other side rejected it. Think about it yourself. Hearing this, Shea stared blankly for a moment. Then, he took a deep breath and endured the surprise in his heart. Then, you said that the tail feather of some bird, and that something spider silk, plus that something flower juice, when combined together, how good is it? I've only heard that a few of the strongest elves seem to have battle robes made of the same materials. But to gather such things, it's simply too difficult. The spirit spider spits out silk once every 30 years, but only a small portion of the silk can be used to weave. As for the rainbow feathers flamingo, you've seen the flamingo before. It's the thing that Mr. Peach brought and almost killed you. But the rainbow feathers flamingo is several times stronger than an ordinary flamingo, and the feathers on its body are extremely hard. Especially towards magic attacks, it has an extremely strong immunity. In this point, it even surpasses our dragon clan by a lot. Especially its tail feathers, they are the hardest and most precious. Sigh. Using these few materials to weave a battle robe, at least you can say that. As long as you don't meet a great Magus-level magic expert, other than that, if other magic attacks hit your body, you can completely treat it as a gust of wind. Even because the flamingo is a fire-type beast, its defense against fire magic is especially strong. With so many precious materials, I estimate that at least in terms of fire magic, even if a great magus personally attacks you with fire magic, you can completely ignore it, as long as the other party doesn't use forbidden magic. Shea, after holding back for a long time, the country bumpkin suddenly turned his head and looked at the 12 elves walking behind him. His eyes suddenly became incomparably fervent. To be continued. If you want to know what happens next, please go to www.chidian.com, support the author, support the original reading. Chapter 391. Yesterday, I skipped my ticket again. I won't apologize with words, I'll use my actions to show my sincerity. I'll send out 8,000 words of new chapters, and the remaining few hundred words will be free. I owe quite a lot of new chapters, and it is not realistic to finish them all in one day. From today onwards, 8,000 words per day for 1 week. GOR Chapter 370. Very much Merlin's reputation was truly unimaginable. After being reprimanded by Dora, Shea's attitude towards the elves became particularly cordial. Along the way, he even deliberately tried to find topics to talk about with the female elf named Vivian. The country bumpkin's thoughts were very simple, and he didn't have many tricks up his sleeve. He simply thought that since she had given him such a precious gift from afar, he naturally had to be more hospitable to her in order to express his gratitude. However, in the face of Shea's cordial attitude, the female elf's attitude was very cold. Although there was still a smile on her face when she spoke, that smile clearly contained traces of reservation and arrogance. Her tone was neither cold nor warm. Whenever Shea asked a few more questions, a trace of impatience would flash across her eyes. In the end, Vivian's eyes gradually turned cold. That arrogant look caused Shea to feel somewhat uncomfortable. Thus, he simply shut his mouth and did not say anything else. Walking back to the front of the group, Shea could not help but secretly gulp. He took a deep breath and suppressed the displeasure in his heart. Humph! These elves, even if they did give Lao Tzu a big gift, there is no need to be so arrogant, right? This little elven girl's eyes are practically growing on top of her head. Hearing Shea's complaints, Dora suddenly sneered. Humph! Humans! Her voice and tone clearly carried a deeper meaning. Hearing that, Shea could not help but ask, "What did you say?" "Humph, you humans, you say that the elves are arrogant, but are you humans any better?" Shea. "Brat, don't be unconvinced," Dora said coldly. "The elves have always thought of themselves as a noble and intelligent race. They are a group of creatures who love beauty to death and also love face to death. Elves have always regarded themselves as one of the noblest races in the world. They naturally believe that they stand at the top of all living things. But you humans, in their eyes, are not." "What?" Dora snorted and continued, "Let me ask you, what did you think when you saw those goblins in the red wilderness on the wildfire plains?" Shea subconsciously said, "Dirty, despicable, greedy, weak, ugly." He had only said a few words when he suddenly paused. Then, he shut his mouth and widened his eyes. After being stunned for a while, he flew into a rage. "This little bitch, how dare she treat us humans like goblins?" Dora's tone was full of disdain, but her words made Shea speechless. "If you humans can look down on the goblins, then why can't the elves look down on you humans?" Dora's voice was full of disdain. In ancient times there was a saying, "Those who humiliate others will be humiliated by others." I heard that this saying was said by you humans. Think about what it means. Hearing that, Shea suddenly could not say a word. The cavalrymen led the way and escorted the procession through the streets of Denzel City. The 12 stunningly beautiful elven women in the procession immediately attracted the attention of many onlookers on the street. Many people looked at the 12 elven women in the procession with amazement and admiration in their eyes. There were also many people who pointed at the thin tips of the elven women's ears that stuck out from the hair on both sides of the elven women's head. On the other hand, the elven women did not seem to care too much about the onlookers. They did not show too much impatience or annoyance at the pointing and whispering around them. They maintained a faint, reserved and proud look from beginning to end. Shea suddenly understood. The behavior of these elves was indeed like when he first entered the Red Wilderness. Along the way, when the goblins followed and spied on him from afar, he seemed to have the same arrogant and disdainful attitude. He could not help but ask himself in his heart, just like what Dora said, does one race really have the right to look down on other races? In the logistics camp in the city, Ka-Tua had already received a message from Shea's men. Although he was a little unwilling to give up this extremely comfortable nest. Even when he came out to greet them, the smuggler looked a little unhappy. It was summer now, and the ice cubes in the ice cellar were rare goods. However, when the smuggler saw the 12 elves brought by Shea, his eyes suddenly lit up. At this moment, the smuggler's eyes, in Shea's view, were even brighter than when Hastings showed his power. This bastard Ka-Tua used a solicitous and almost flattering manner to welcome the 12 elven women into his nest, and then enthusiastically introduced all the facilities here one by one. There are a lot of ice cubes stored in the ice cellar, which is useful now in this season. There are also the flower beds in the backyard of the courtyard. Although they are not expensive flowers and plants, they are rare in this place. The water in the pond in the back is absolutely clean, and there are also some fish. There is also a beehive outside, where you can collect honey for drinking. It was clear that the smuggler's eyes were constantly roaming around the 12 beautiful female elves as he introduced the elves non-stop. Shea felt a little angry as he watched. Damn it, this bastard, I am his big boss, and this guy didn't even fawn over Lao Tzu so enthusiastically. However, in the face of Ka-Tuo's excessive enthusiasm, Vivian still displayed her noble and slightly arrogant smile. She only quietly listened to Ka-Tuo's introduction before turning to look at Shea. Sir, we are very satisfied with this place, but when we are staying here, please give the order that no one is allowed to disturb us, so as to not delay the work of the weavers. Shea immediately promised. I will send a group of my personal guards to guard this courtyard, and no one is allowed to come in and disturb you. As he said that, Shea looked deeply at Ka-Tua and smiled meaningfully. No one, especially the soldiers of the logistics camp, is allowed to spy on us. Ka-Tuo's face immediately fell. Shea couldn't be bothered to look at Vivian's arrogant smile anymore, and directly dragged Ka-Tua away. As soon as they walked out, Ka-Tua couldn't help but complain. Shea laughed and looked at this guy. You were drooling on your chest just now, didn't you notice? Ka-Tuo's face was stiff. Men are naturally lustful, and Lao Tzu doesn't have a wife or woman. He's almost 30 years old now, and he's still single. You bastard. You already have such a beautiful princess. Of course you're a full man who doesn't know the hunger of a starving man. When Shea heard this, he couldn't help but laugh. They're not humans. They're elves. Ka-Tua blinked. What's wrong with elves? I heard that mixed bloods are smarter and more beautiful. After a pause, he immediately begged Shea, let me be in charge of the security here. I'll temporarily be your personal guard captain. Shea snorted. I'm afraid you'll embezzle. But when he saw Ka-Tua looking at him so eagerly, he sighed. Fine, I'll let you do it. He then warned, don't go overboard, you have to know your limits. These people are Merlin's guests, if you anger them and offend Merlin, you know the consequences. Just look at Todoro's miserable appearance now. When Ka-Tua heard this, he immediately shuddered, but after all, he was lustful, so he gathered his courage and said, I'm not afraid. I won't do anything overboard, I'll just have more opportunities to interact with them. Shea laughed, no longer caring about him, and immediately left with his men. When he came out, Dora curiously asked in his mind, You're just going to let your men do as they please? What else can I do? Shea smiled and said, I'm a man. When a man is lustful, if I forcibly stop him, it will instead arouse a rebellious mentality. It's better to follow his wishes and let him hit the wall and suffer. Shea said this and laughed strangely. Just like you said, in the eyes of these elves, we humans are the same as how we look at goblins. Just like how we humans won't fall in love with goblins, these elves will absolutely not fall in love with Ka-Toa. Ha 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 ha, let him hit the wall and suffer. After settling these elves, Shea had another thought. The elves have given Merlin so much face, and this gift they sent, Dora said it was so magical. Then there is still a group of dwarves outside the city. I wonder what kind of gift the dwarves will give? The elves will give a battle robe. Then, will the dwarves give a godly weapon? As for weapons, Shea already had the fire fork, so he didn't really care about other weapons. He had full confidence that in this world, it would be difficult to find a weapon more powerful than his fire fork. However, if he could get a set of dwarf-made armor, that would be good. Thinking of this, his eyes suddenly lit up. Dragon scales. Dragon scale armor. Back then, he had obtained so many good things from Dora. Dragon scales, dragon bones, dragon tendons, dragon blood, especially dragon scales. Their defensive capabilities were absolutely top-notch. They were practically immune to ordinary attacks. Even in a confrontation with a top-notch expert, they would have a big advantage. For example, when Shea completely defeated Philip in the arena, Shea's true strength was actually about the same as Philip. However, by relying on his sharp weapon and the dragon scales hidden in his clothes, he was able to beat Philip, who was slightly stronger than him, into submission. Ordinary dragon scales already had such an effect. If he could forge and process a set of dragon scale armor, wouldn't that be eye-catching? The effect of dragon scales, whether it was physical or magical defense, was recognized as a top-notch material. In the past, he heard that Guy Ada said that only dwarven craftsmen had the ability to forge dragon scales. He couldn't find dwarven craftsmen before, but now, such a large group of dwarves, weren't they delivering themselves to his door? Imagine himself wearing the high magical defense cloak made by the elves, wearing a set of impenetrable dragon scale armor, and holding an indestructible and sharp fire fork. The next time he met Hastings, he would have the capital to kick his ass. Of course, that was under the condition that Hastings hadn't recovered to the level of a powerhouse. If Hastings recovered to the level of a powerhouse, no amount of country bumpkins would be enough to deal with him. The more Shea thought about it, the more eager he became. He directly turned his horse around and rushed back to his city guard mansion with his people. Most of his precious materials were stored in his private storehouse in the mayor's mansion. He was going to transport them outside the city and find those dwarves to try his luck. Speaking of which, Shea hadn't returned to the city guard mansion for many days. He rushed back like a gust of wind with his people, got off his horse, and rushed inside. He rushed into his residence and opened his private warehouse. The so-called private warehouse of Shea was nothing else but the portable storage device he got from the Goblin Cave, which was the Goblin Carriage. After he got off and came back, he threw all his precious things into the carriage. This thing was very good. There were dozens of storage spaces hidden inside. It didn't take up much space, and there was no need to worry about people stealing it. People who weren't familiar with the goblin language wouldn't understand the meaning of the knobs. He grabbed a big bag and wrapped a lot of dragon scales. When he came out and walked to the front hall, he suddenly heard a call from the side. "Hey, country bumpkin." This soft call seemed to have some hidden bitterness, some melancholy, and some sadness. The voice was melancholy, but it also seemed to be full of affection. Shea turned his head, and his body suddenly shook. His hand loosened, and the big bag fell to the ground. Poor thing Adeline was standing at the side door, leaning against the door. She was tall, but she seemed to have lost a lot of weight. Even her chin seemed to have become sharper. Her face was slightly haggard, and her golden hair was tied up. Her eyes seemed to have an endless depth of meaning. Her bright eyes made Shea a little absent-minded. Sigh. Why didn't I notice it before? Poor thing. Her eyes are actually so beautiful. Almost involuntarily, Shea's heartbeat sped up. What made Shea feel even more indescribable was that Adeline in front of him wasn't wearing female clothes. She was wearing a short-sleeved shirt and a robe, with a belt and a pair of calfskin boots. Her hair was tied up, giving her a refreshing and capable look. Surprisingly, she was dressed like a young man. What made Shea feel even more was that this outfit was 70 to 80% similar to when the two of them first met in the Wildfire Plains. At that time, Adeline was dressed like this. She was injured by a beast trap and almost died in the forest. That was how Shea found her. Adeline's eyes, which were filled with deep emotions, made Shea feel slightly uncomfortable. He subconsciously turned his face away and forced a smile. It's you, why did you call me? What's the matter? His words were somewhat stiff, and it also seemed somewhat awkward. His tone immediately caused the flames in Adeline's eyes to dim. She lowered her head and took a deep breath. When she raised her head, she looked straight into Shea's eyes. You haven't been back for many days. I'd have a lot of things to do. Shea himself felt that his words were somewhat insincere. A lot of things to do. Hearing that, the corners of Adeline's mouth twitched in an imperceptible manner. What a lousy excuse, truth be told. Shea himself could feel how guilty he was when he said those words. Did he really move to the military camp outside the city because he was busy? Did he really hide outside the city because he was afraid of Merlin? Did he really run to the military camp outside the city because he was tired of the rats and crows that Merlin had created in the town defense mansion? It seemed the deepest and truest reason in his heart seemed to have something to do with this person before him. To be frank, Shea dared not face Adeline. Yes, he was afraid. He dared not. The real reason was that he was a young country bumpkin, a young and ignorant country bumpkin. When he faced Adeline, this person who occupied an important and complicated position in his heart, the country bumpkin felt at a loss and even fear. He did not know how he should face this girl who was looking at him with deep affection. Like in the past, hug her shoulders like a good brother and give her a knock on the forehead? Clearly, that would not work, but treat her like a woman? Or should he just say treat her like his wife, his lover? It seemed. Shea's heart was still unable to wrap itself around this turn. Son of a bitch. This is simply too twisted. Shea was lost in his thoughts, and he forgot to speak. He did not notice that the warmth in Adeline's eyes was slowly cooling down due to Shea's silence. I heard that you have been very busy recently. You take care of your body, Adeline said in a low voice. I know that your body has always been very strong. However, no matter how strong a person is, there is no one who does not get sick all their life. Don't work too hard. You are always too reckless. You think that when you encounter something, you can solve it by putting your life on the line. But you only have one life. You are now a great general. You need to pay more attention to your words and actions. Don't be as careless as before. Sir Merlin is just being kind. Don't hate him too much. If you want to blame someone, blame me. I am the one who went too far. Adeline's words left Shea speechless. It seemed as though he had heard them, but also as though he had not. He simply looked at Adeline and did not know what he was feeling. Strange? Yes. Awkward? Yes. Pity? Yes. Even as he looked at Adeline's gradually reddening eyes, he had an impulse to embrace her. There was also an impulse, but Shea remained silent for too long. Adeline finally finished her words and glanced at Shea. I know that you don't want to marry me. I will think of a way to make things clear to Sir Merlin. I will bear the consequences of this matter. I won't make things difficult for you. At this time, The pity and complex feelings in Shea's heart were getting stronger and stronger. Just when he really couldn't bear it and was about to do something, Adeline was finally completely disappointed in her heart. The girl sighed faintly. This sigh was truly filled with endless heartache and coldness. She hurriedly turned her head and quickly left. Because she turned her head, Shea did not see the few drops of sparkling tears falling from the corners of Adeline's eyes. Seeing Adeline quickly leave, Shea sighed with a sense of loss. Idiot! Dora sneered in his mind. What? Shea's tone was very calm. Even I don't understand. What are you hesitating for? Dora sneered. Such a beautiful girl with a noble status. She is deeply in love with you. You two have deep feelings for each other and have experienced many things together. What are you still hesitating for? Shea's face was complicated and he finally shook his head. You don't understand. Dora, although you are smart and wise, you are still a dragon. You are not a human. You don't understand my current thoughts. You have already eaten the meat. Now that it is time to pay, you are actually putting on airs. You heartless little bastard. Ha 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 ha. Dora laughed without restraint. Shea was dumbfounded. What do you mean I have to pay for the meat? What do you mean by that? Dora snorted a few times and refused to say anything else. After that, Shea suddenly lost interest. He carried out a pile of dragon scales, but he was no longer in the mood to visit the dwarves. He wanted to inform Merlin about the arrival of the elves and dwarves, but the death to trespassers sign in the backyard made Shea not dare to touch Merlin's bad luck. When this woman went crazy, she could really do anything. Even somewhat absent-mindedly, Shea brought people back to the barracks outside the city. He only sent people to deliver some food to the dwarves living in the barracks outside the city. Rumor has it that dwarves like to drink, so Shea sent people to deliver dozens of barrels of wine. For him, this was a very generous gesture. This wine was the old wine stored in the warehouse. In addition, there was no new wine in the entire Denzel city or even Moore County. During the chaos of war, there was a shortage of food. Making wine required a large amount of food. However, it could only be enjoyed as a luxury. Thus, Shea had already issued a wartime order to prohibit the waste of food by making wine in the entire Moore County. For the rest of the day, Shea was somewhat absent-minded in the military camp. His mind was constantly wandering. When he was training with the cavalry on the training ground as the commander, he made a few mistakes due to his absent-mindedness. It was very different from his usual energetic appearance. However, Shea was very strict in his management of the army. This was something he had learned from the domineering Scarface General Adric. Since he had made a mistake, he carried out the military law without saying a word. Under the watchful eyes of the cavalry, he received 5 lashes as punishment. Without saying a word, he put on his clothes and continued training with the cavalry. His actions did not cause the others to look down on him due to his mistake. Instead, it caused the cavalry to feel even more respect for him. However, there was a faint feeling of unease within Shea's heart. It was as though this feeling of unease came from the day that girl. Before she left, that pair of sorrowful eyes. That's right. It was that gaze. It was as though Shea could not let go of it. Even when it was time to rest at night, Shea lay on his bed, tossing and turning. After tossing and turning for half the night, he was unable to fall asleep. He did not know what was on his mind. Early the next morning, he got up with a pair of dark circles and bloodshot eyes. He took a cold shower and ran to the training ground to sweat with the soldiers for the entire morning. Even though he was training with all his might, the strange feeling of unease within his heart could not be dispelled. Finally, at noon, Shea made up his mind. At night, the training will be over. I should go into the city and return to the residence to take a look. Shea found an excuse for himself. Let's see if Merlin is willing to meet people or not. Also, That little pitiful worm, her complexion didn't seem too good yesterday. Her body has always been so weak, so it's best that nothing bad happens to her. In short, the current country bumpkin would never admit that he missed that little poor thing. Not even a little bit. After making a decision in his heart, Shaya's complexion and spirit improved a lot during the afternoon training. He even faintly felt a little bit strange looking forward to going back to the city to see the pitiful worm in the evening. This feeling, of course, Shaya himself would not admit it. At night, Shaya was about to return to the city. Coincidentally, Green from the army sent Jalunxier to meet Shaya to discuss some military affairs. In the future garrison regiment, Jalunxier, the old guy from the 6th Corps, would be appointed as the deputy general of the regiment. According to Shaya's plan, he would be stationed in Metzda city. Therefore, Jalunxier came to ask for instructions from Shaya on many military affairs. The two of them discussed the defense of Metter city. After this discussion, Shaya simply sent someone to invite Green over. After this discussion, the sky was already filled with stars. Even though Shaya wanted to enter the city, seeing that it was so late at night, he felt embarrassed to meet the poor thing. She must be asleep now, right? If he went to see her now, he would have no excuse. Idiot, why would a man need to find an excuse to see his fiancée? In his mind, Dora desperately mocked Shaya. In short, Shaya had to wait for another day. The next day, when the sky was bright, Shaya made up his mind. No matter what, I have to go to the city today. In the morning, he threw all the training matters to Sharba. Then, he deliberately took a bath and changed into a clean set of clothes before riding back to the city. Along the way, he was somewhat excited and anxious. When he arrived at the mayor's mansion, the first thing he did was to run to the backyard. He did not dare to trespass on Merlin's signboard. He could only wait outside for a while. However, waiting like this was not a solution. Shaya could only shout a few words. Poor thing? That AI, the short leader? At the beginning, his voice was still very soft. His strange expression was heard by the attendants around him. Each of them had a strange smile on their faces. However, after shouting for a while, there was no response from inside. Shaya became anxious. He found a servant in the mansion and asked. It turned out that after Shaya had issued a ban on entering the backyard, no one in the mayor's mansion was allowed to enter the backyard without permission. Only Adeline and Merlin were living in the backyard. That little girl Suling of the Zucker tribe originally wanted to live in the backyard as well. However, in the end, she was forcefully dragged away by her tribesman's chief warrior, Garin. Since they were not allowed to enter the backyard, Merlin and Adeline's food and drink could only be taken by Adeline. Adeline would not come out every day. Only every 2 or 3 days would she come out to take some food and water. Every time, she would take enough for a few days. However, according to the servant, Miss Adeline had not come out for 2 days. When Shaya heard this, an extremely strong sense of uneasiness appeared in his heart. His eyes turned and he blurted out, "Not good. She's gone." Thinking of that, Shaya became anxious. How could he still care about the sign that Merlin had put up outside? He immediately strode into the backyard and ran into the main hall. There was no one there. Adeline was nowhere to be seen. Even Merlin was nowhere to be seen. There were originally 2 rooms in the main hall. However, the inner wall had been broken by Merlin and a pile of broken bricks and stones were thrown outside, turning it into a large room. The interior was now filled with various strange smells. When Shaya smelled it, he nearly fainted. He did not know what kind of magic potion it was. There was a large table and various strange items were placed on top of it. There were animal organs, various plants, strange metals and stones. However, Merlin was nowhere to be seen. Shaya ignored Merlin and ran directly to the room next door. In one breath, he reached Adeline's bedroom. He did not bother knocking on the door. Instead, he slammed the door open and rushed in. As expected, there was no one in the room. He opened the wardrobe. It was empty. The bed was neat and tidy. Where is she? Shea turned his head around, his face filled with rage. Where is she? The attendants and servants behind him were at a loss. After venting his anger, Shea sighed and sat down weakly on the bed. All right. I don't blame you. I was the one who told you not to go near the backyard. He sat on the bed in a daze. Suddenly, he reached out with his hand and something appeared in his hand. It was a piece of snow-white paper. It was folded neatly and placed on the bed. The sheet was snow-white and he had not noticed it earlier. Shea hurriedly opened it. Sure enough, it was a letter written to him. Country bumpkin, I am leaving. Although I am somewhat reluctant, you do not want me to leave. But I know that you don't want me, so it seems that I have no other choice but to leave. As I said before, I will not make things difficult for you. Since you are unwilling to marry me, I can only leave. I am the one who took the initiative to leave. Naturally, Sir Merlin will not blame you. I do not know when you will see this letter. Perhaps, since you have never come to the city to visit me, you will not discover that I have gone missing for at least half a month. There is something that I have kept in my heart. I have never had the opportunity to tell you because you are unwilling to even look at me. Now that I am leaving, I can only write it to you in this letter. And, Shea Thunder, I love you. I love you very much. Adeline, I love you very much. I love you very much. I love you very much. Shea blankly held the letter and stared blankly for a while. Then, he suddenly screamed, raised his hand, and fiercely slapped his own face a few times. Shea Thunder! You bastard! 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 The one who scolded out was not Dora. Rather, it was Shea himself. He abruptly jumped up and rushed out. The muscles on his face contorted. Men! Prepare the horses! Prepare the horses! Get my horse harness! Go to the stable and get 3 of your best horses! Hurry! Hurry! As Shea ran, he shouted, Send someone to inform Green that I will be away for a few days. I will be back soon. During my absence, he will be in charge of everything. Dora shouted within his mind. If you go after her now, are you not afraid that it will be too late? Who knows how long she has been gone in this vast sea of people? How are you going to find her? Shea's eyes flickered. At that moment, his mind suddenly became incomparably clear. Adeline, she is not loved by the Byzantium imperial family. With Osgilla besieged, she cannot possibly return to the imperial capital. No matter how you look at it, there is only one possibility for her to have gone there. After saying that, Shea took a deep breath and spoke out fiercely. Odin! Even if it means going through a mountain of blades and a sea of flames, Lao Tzu will get her back. She. Shea finally shouted out. She is my, Shea Thunder's, woman. To be continued. If you want to know what happened next, please go to www.chidian.com. Support the author, support the original reading. Chapter 392. This chapter is too slow and it's too late. This chapter of 8,000 words can be considered as written on Tuesday the 12th. GOR Chapter 371 came specifically to see you. The guards from the mansion quickly brought over the horses and Shea rode 3 horses. After tying up the horses, he rushed out of the city. Before he could reach the city gates, he heard the sound of galloping horses coming from behind him. He could also faintly hear someone shouting. Shea quickly reined in his horse and turned around to see Green galloping toward him. When Green arrived before him, Old Mad Dog's face was covered in sweat. His face was ashen and filled with rage. Shea, where do you think you are going? Green roared furiously. Just now, you sent someone to inform me that you are going out for a few days? You want me to take full responsibility. What nonsense are you doing? Shea sat on the horse and looked into Green's eyes. He took a deep breath and said, "My wife ran away. I am going to chase her back." Those words caused Green's face to turn pale. Old Mad Dog's body swayed and he nearly fell off the horse. Then, he finally roared out, "What did you say? You bastard! Just how many important things are waiting for you to do? The new army is about to be established. At present, military affairs are heavy and we are surrounded by enemies like tigers and wolves. The situation does not allow us to take a breather. What kind of nonsense are you spouting at a time like this? What kind of nonsense are you doing? Chase, for the sake of chasing a woman, you are abandoning your subordinates, your army, your territory, you are abandoning such a big mess?" Shea said, "Don't we still have you here? But you are the leader." Mad Dog Green roared out these words. Shea's face was dark as well. He rode on his horse and his brows furrowed together. His eyes were cloudy and uncertain as he looked at Green. The bigger picture is the most important. How can we let our personal affairs get in the way? Shea thunder. You are someone who is going to do big things. If you want to do big things, how can you be so wishy-washy? How many people are looking at you? How many people have entrusted their lives to you? How many burdens and responsibilities are on your shoulders right now? Don't you know? You bastard! Bastard! Green seemed to have lost his head in anger. The two of them were just below the city gate when Green started to curse. The soldiers and passers-by around the city gate began to watch. Fortunately, a group of guards who came with Green immediately began to perform their duties and drove away the onlookers. Green. Shea took a deep breath and carefully stared into Green's eyes. He said word by word in a deep voice, "I know what I'm shouldering, and I also know my responsibilities. But please understand that I know what I'm doing. Your mission now is to protect this land." Grim growled. "Protect." Shea suddenly smiled. His smile was somewhat strange, and there was even some deep self-mockery. "Protect." Then, he raised his voice and stared at Green as he shouted, "As a real man, if I can't even protect my wife, then how can I talk about protecting other lands and people? I'm simply deceiving myself." At this point, Shea raised his head and looked at Green. "I know what I'm doing. I've already made up my mind. Green, you don't need to say any more. I'll only be gone for a few days. I'll come back after I chase Adeline. It won't take more than a few days. Besides, don't I still have you here?" Green was so angry that his fingers trembled and his face was pale. He glared at Shea and only shouted in a low voice, "Bastard! Bastard! Stupid! Extremely stupid!" Shea looked at Green's appearance and knew that this old mad dog was very angry. He sighed, but his decision absolutely could not be changed. So he bowed to Green and said in a low voice, "I'm sorry, Green, but this matter, I must do it." After saying this, Shea turned his horse around and headed out of the city. The horse's hooves were hurried, leaving a trail of yellow dust as it headed north. Green was sitting on the horse under the city gate. His face was still pale and he was so angry that his whole body trembled. He kept cursing in a low voice, "Idiot! A big idiot! I, Green, am also an idiot. How could I assist such a good-for-nothing bastard? I'm not doing this anymore. I quit. This kind of idiot, how can he succeed? Lao Tzu quit." After cursing for a while, he suddenly heard a leisurely laugh from the side. "Lord Green, do you really want to resign and live in seclusion?" Wu Ran Green turned his head and glared at the person who spoke with a face full of rage. Bobov Dax was riding on a horse. He just happened to be dealing with military affairs at Green's place and galloped with Green to stop Shea. But when Green stopped Shea, this guy just watched from the side and didn't say a word. At this moment, Shea ran away. Green was so angry that he was cursing, but this guy was leisurely on the side of the horse. He was digging his ear with his little finger and his face had a comfortable and satisfied smile. This tone of voice was really somewhat annoying. Green's face immediately darkened and he looked at Dax. I think Lord Green doesn't really want to fling your sleeves and leave, you just want to vent your anger. Haha, there's no need to say such angry words. Dax quickly smiled and said with a pleasant face, I think our boss, although young and impulsive, is not bad. But, for a woman, to throw away so many important matters. Dax didn't wait for Green to finish and suddenly interrupted him, asking, Lord Green, let me ask you a question. If our boss was the kind of person who would harden his heart and be ruthless, willing to sacrifice anyone in order to succeed, if he was such a person, would you still be willing to follow him? Green. Dax looked at Green and his eyes flashed with a trace of a smile. He walked over and gently flicked his little finger. Then he pulled Green's sleeve and said with a smile, Okay, you've already scolded him and vented some of your anger. If you really can't do it, when that guy comes back, I'll help you scold him a few more times. If you still can't do it, you can carry out military law and give him a few beatings. I heard that our Lord is very willing to set himself as an example and accept military punishment. Yesterday, I heard that he took the initiative to accept military punishment on the training field. After saying that, Dax finally dragged Green back and almost pulled old Green off his horse. Hey, I paid a lot of money out of my own pocket. You can't go back on your word. I'm very poor. Sigh, where can you find a good person like me who is loyal to his duty and willing to pay out of his own pocket for official business? Hey, old mad dog, say something. I'm waiting for you to reimburse me. Otherwise, I won't even have money for tomorrow's meal. Hey, don't be so serious. Say something, say something. The sun set and the horizon was filled with red clouds. The originally desolate wildfire plains in the evening was dyed red, as if it was full of life. In the border town of Wildfire Town, a handsome horse slowly walked through the slightly dilapidated gate of the town. When it passed by the small circular square inside the city gate, the person on the horse suddenly sighed faintly. Adeline was wearing a felt hat. The brim of the hat was pulled low and some golden hair could be seen on the sides. She was wearing men's clothes. It was the clothes she wore when she bid farewell to Shea. At this moment, there was some wind and frost and dust on her face. It was clear that she had been riding a horse for a long time. When she walked into Wildfire Town, Adeline was clearly a little absent-minded. Looking at the town, she suddenly felt a knot in her heart. This is the place he grew up in, walking through the streets, looking at the houses on both sides, looking at the different kinds of people, mercenaries and traveling merchants. Adeline's thoughts flew off somewhere. When the time comes, we can buy a house in Wildfire Town, raise a few horses, and let that fellow Todoro perform magic. We can form a circus. She suddenly thought of that heartless fellow's voice. She thought of the simple and honest smile on his face when he said those words. Damn it, how did she lose her mind back then to actually think that this country bumpkin was the man she could rely on? Wildfire Town, sigh, Wildfire Town. If she hadn't been chased back to the imperial capital and had really followed him here, we could have bought a house here, had our own courtyard, and raised a few horses perhaps. That kind of life would have been very happy. Wildfire Town. Wildfire Town, it really is a sad place. A bitter smile appeared on Adeline's face. It wasn't the first time she went out alone. At least after gaining some common sense, she knew to make some changes to her attire. At this moment, Adeline's originally beautiful long golden hair had been cut short by herself and covered with a broken felt hat. At the same time, her face was covered with dust. She even used some makeup skills to make her face look more angular and masculine. In addition to the men's robes and the fact that she originally had Odin's bloodline and her tall height, if one didn't look carefully, there wouldn't be too many flaws. Adeline was already very clear that her beautiful appearance would be the source of many dangers for a girl who went out alone. However, although she realized that she had to change her attire, this noble princess still lacked some experience in the pugilistic world. Just as she entered Wildfire Town absent-mindedly, she didn't notice that in the corner of the town gate, a few covetous gazes had long been fixed on her. A stranger who came to Wildfire Town, and alone without any companions. More importantly, the bundle on Adeline's back was obviously made of high-quality cloth. That bulging bundle clearly didn't only contain clothes, there were also some other things. And the sword on her back. The scabbard was also made of high-quality crocodile leather and embedded with gems. These were enough to attract prying gazes. Under the curtain of night, a few figures quietly followed Adeline from behind. The war didn't seem to affect the prosperity of Wildfire Town. Even at night, the streets were still filled with people. Drunkards staggering as they walked, merchants dressed in all kinds of clothes, prostitutes who also reeked of alcohol in their arms, and some with suspicious faces who stood in the corner and talked in low voices. Who knew what kind of shady business they were doing? Occasionally, there would be some majestic and courteous mercenaries carrying weapons on their backs as they walked on the streets with their heads held high and their chests puffed out. They purposely left their shirts open and exposed their strong muscles, attracting the prostitutes on both sides of the street who were soliciting business to throw flirtatious glances at them from time to time. In such an environment, Adeline rode her horse along the streets into Wildfire Town. Just like a little white rabbit that had walked into a wolf's den. There were inns on both sides of the street, but Adeline walked past two of them. Seeing the dirty shops from afar, she hesitated a little. After walking past two streets, she finally stopped her horse in front of a shop with a signboard with a wine cup hanging on it. Clearly, this was a combination of a tavern and an inn. The small sliding door at the entrance was half open, revealing the red light from inside. It was a stark contrast to the dark streets outside. Also, there was the sound of bustling noise coming from behind the door. There were the shouts of drunkards, the sound of zither music, and the cheerful rhythm of tap dancing. Most importantly, the signboard, windows, and doors of this shop were all very clean. Adeline pulled on her hat and finally made a decision. She got off her horse and walked to the entrance of the shop. A worker at the entrance immediately came out to welcome her. He took Adeline's horse and guided her into the shop. This shop wasn't too big, but it gave Adeline a familiar feeling. It seemed like she had been here before, and she couldn't really remember. More than half of the dozen or so tables in the shop were filled. Many customers were happily raising their wine cups and drinking happily. In the middle of the shop, there was a guy with only one eye wearing a Atlantis-style pirate headband. He held a zither in his hand and was excitedly playing it. Under his music, many customers even stood on the tables and happily danced. There were also some merchants who were hugging prostitutes as they laughed and shouted without restraint. The one eye playing the zither had a face full of smiles. When he grinned, a mouthful of golden teeth could be seen. Looking at those golden teeth, Adeline seemed to be touched by something sad in her heart. She immediately turned her head away. Walking to the front of the bar counter, there was a middle-aged auntie with a headband on her head. Her waist was as thick as a water bucket and she wore a dress made of coarse cloth. She even wore a bib full of stains. She held a piece of cloth in her hand and was wiping a wine cup. "Good night, young customer. Welcome to the One Eyes Inn. What do you need?" "Dear, we have the best ale in all of Wildfire Town." The middle-aged auntie behind the bar counter was laughing heartily. Adeline opened her mouth and immediately realized that her voice was too crisp. She lowered her voice and purposely said with a rough voice, "I haven't eaten dinner yet. Is there anything to eat?" The middle-aged auntie behind the bar counter revealed a trace of a strange smile. She looked at Adeline and then happily said, "Of course there is. In the kitchen, there's some stewed lamb tendons and some fresh bean soup. It's thick and fragrant. I suggest you try it. My Auntie Sophia's bean soup is the most famous delicacy in Wildfire Town." Auntie Sophia, this name seemed to make Adeline's heart stir. This name, she seemed to have heard it from that country bumpkin's mouth before? She forcefully shook her head and then forced herself to push that person's figure out of her mind. The enthusiastic Auntie Sophia quickly came out from behind the bar counter and led Adeline to a table in the corner. The lively tables in the middle were all occupied by other customers. Just as Adeline was about to sit down, the door to the inn was pushed open and several suspicious-looking fellows walked in. After looking around the entrance, these fellows fixed their gazes on Adeline in the corner. Then, they quietly walked over and sat at a table not far from Adeline's. Two of them ran to the bar counter and ordered several cups of ale. They divided it among themselves and sat there. They appeared to be absent-minded as they drank. However, from time to time, they would glance at Adeline's bag. Adeline looked at the cheerful customers in the inn. The surrounding sounds of laughter and music made her originally cold heart feel slightly warmer. She was lost in thought for a moment. At this moment, a plate was placed before her. Adeline raised her head and saw that the kind-looking Auntie Sophia was standing before her. She placed a plate of steaming mutton stewed with beans before her and gave her a spoon. Finally, she brought over a large cup of ale. "The ale is free." Auntie Sophia smiled as she looked at Adeline. "Drinking less ale will not make you drunk. Instead, it will make you feel better. It seems you will be staying here tonight. I will tidy up a clean room for you upstairs. There is also hot bath water." Adeline was about to say a few words of thanks when Auntie Sophia nonchalantly added, "You are still young. Going out alone, you should be careful." After saying that, her eyes swept over the people at the table beside them. Unfortunately, Adeline did not understand the meaning behind those words. She simply nodded her head and said a few words of thanks. Auntie Sophia pursed her lips and walked back. Before she left, she muttered a few words, seemingly saying something along the lines of real. Although Adeline was hungry, she still had a lot on her mind. Therefore, even though the mutton stewed with beans in front of her was indeed delicious, and Aunt Sophia's bean soup was also very fragrant, she still put down her spoon after eating only half of it. Instead, she drank the large cup of ale, not leaving a single drop behind. The alcohol content of the ale was very low and there was a hint of the sweetness of the wheat. Thus, it was not too hard to swallow. However, Adeline rarely drank. After drinking the cup of ale, it did not take long for her face to turn red. Her mind was already filled with worries. Now, after being stimulated by the wine, her eyes could not help but become somewhat absent-minded. Just as Adeline's eyes began to lose focus, two of the people at the table beside them stood up. They pretended to be watching the people dancing in the middle while they quietly moved their feet toward Adeline's table. One of them had a hand behind his back and a short dagger was hidden in his sleeve. Adeline's mind was somewhat blurred, she was too tired. Truth be told, she had not slept well for many days. Now that she had eaten and drunk some wine, she began to feel dizzy as she sat at the table. She did not even notice that the two fellows were standing close to her table. One of the fellows turned his body to the side, using his body to block the gazes of the people outside. At the same time, he quietly turned his dagger, the edge of the blade shining brightly. It was at that moment that the fat figure suddenly appeared beside the two fellows like a ghost. A thick palm filled with calluses gently grasped the wrist that was holding the dagger. Next, it gave a seemingly casual shake. Clang! The dagger fell to the ground. This sound woke up Adeline, who was somewhat dozing off. "He is just a child. Don't bully him." Aunt Sophia maintained her smile as she gripped the wrist of one of the thieves. She said coolly, "Did your boss not teach you that you are not allowed to do business in my shop?" The thief whose wrist was gripped by her was sweating profusely and his face had turned pale from the pain. He forced out a smile and said, "Auntie, but he is a foreigner. We understand the rules. However, we are not allowed to touch a local here." "This kid, oh, is that so?" Aunt Sophia's smile became even more cheerful. Then go back and tell your boss that from today onwards the rules have changed. Regardless of whether you are a local or a foreigner, you are not allowed to do business in my shop. Do you understand?" The thief bent his waist and lowered his head. Only then did Aunt Sophia loosen her grip. With a kind smile, she said, "You little Jack, you grew up drinking my bean soup. Yet, you came here to be naughty. All right, hurry up and leave. When you go back, apply some ointment on your wrist." The thieves immediately fled. In Wildfire Town, those who truly understood that this auntie in the tavern was not someone to be trifled with. Adeline sat there, dumbfounded. It took her quite a while to realize what had just happened. The dazzling dagger on the ground was lying at his feet. Thank you, Sophia, Aunt Sophia." Adeline opened her mouth. Aunt Sophia was already sitting beside her. She looked at Adeline, her eyes filled with smiles. "All right, my dear. It is all right now. You don't need to worry. No one will cause trouble here." After saying that, she picked up the dagger on the ground. Adeline felt some lingering fear. "They wanted to kill me?" "Kill you?" Aunt Sophia was stunned. Then, she smiled and shook her head. No. They wouldn't dare to kill you. They are just some kids who wander around the street. They wouldn't dare to kill you. Holding this dagger, I just want to cut open your bag and take the opportunity to steal something. Of course, if you find out, I'll use this dagger to threaten you so that you won't dare to call for help." After saying that, Aunt Sophia raised her hand and gently stroked Adeline's head. This action was a bit too intimate. However, when she did it, it seemed very natural. It was so natural that even Adeline herself did not feel that this action was abrupt. Really similar. Aunt Sophia gave a low sigh. Then, she smiled again. "All right, my dear. It seems you are exhausted. I have already prepared the room upstairs. The quilt and bedsheets have been washed today. You can go up and rest first. Later, I will bring you the bath water." After saying that, she lowered her voice and smiled. "Don't worry, the things in the room are very clean. I will let you have my niece's room. She has already married out and the room is empty. I have never let those stinky men stay in this room. I think, for a beautiful and lovely girl like you, you must love cleanliness." Adeline's mouth immediately gaped wide open. "All right, no need to be so shocked, my dear. This is Wildfire Town. Your little makeup skills are only enough to fool those street thieves." After saying that, Aunt Sophia looked at the plate in front of Adeline and frowned. "You ate too little, my child. Eat some more. Otherwise, you will be hungry in the middle of the night." "Oh, I remember now. You must have a bad appetite. I still have some pickled broccoli. It is very appetizing. I will get you a bowl." Aunt Sophia quickly stood up and walked to the back of the bar counter. She was busy with something. At that moment, the sliding door of the tavern was pushed open once more. This time, a tall and straight figure slowly walked in from outside the door. The figure who entered had a tall stature with broad shoulders. His body was thick and majestic with a narrow waist and long legs. When she saw the figure, Adeline's eyes immediately lit up. However, when she saw who it was, a look of disappointment appeared on her face. However, when the person who walked in took off the hat that was pressed very low and brushed off the dust on it, she was able to see the person's appearance under the light. Adeline's face suddenly revealed an expression of extreme fear. Her body trembled violently and her face turned pale. She could not help but shrink into the corner of the wall and quickly crouch down. The tall figure standing at the entrance had a handsome face. His eyebrows were rough and his forehead was broad. His face was very masculine and filled with a sense of power. However, his pair of eyes were long and thin, adding a sense of wisdom and femininity to his originally rough face. He wore a long robe that appeared very simple. However, the leather belt around his waist was a rare and colorful snake skin. His head of dark brown hair was somewhat messy, but it also gave off a feeling of flying. His lips were very thin and the lines of his lips were distinct. With this kind of appearance, He was generally someone with a strong will. Judging from his appearance, he was not very old. At most, he was not more than 30 years old. This person stood at the entrance and smiled gently. When the light shone on his face, that smile carried an indescribable feeling of boldness and nobility. "Excuse me, is Auntie Sophia here?" This young man's voice was not loud and his tone could be considered calm. However, this voice seemed to carry with it a sonorous feeling of metal. It was like the killing intent of an army on the battlefield. These words were spoken softly, but strangely, they drowned out the clamor of the audience, as well as the lively music of the zither and the sounds of the dance. Everyone in the audience, even those who were dancing in the middle, heard this sentence clearly. Every word was so clear. This young man seemed to have only spoken softly and simply. Instantly, the entire audience quieted down. He looked at everyone. Finally, his gaze swept around and fell upon Auntie Sophia, who was behind the bar counter. His eyes immediately lit up. Auntie Sophia narrowed her eyes as she looked at this young man. She could not help but frown slightly. "It seems you must be the respected Auntie Sophia." This young man placed one hand on his chest and bowed deeply. "Meeting you is a great honor. Perhaps I should call you Auntie Sophia. However, I think, since that is not your real name, there is no need for us to fuss over the details of how we address you." Auntie Sophia did not say anything. She simply looked at this young man from head to toe. Then, she gave a long sigh. "Looking at you, I can see that you resemble your scoundrel of a father." Sigh. The young man didn't get angry at all. Instead, he smiled and said, "Looking at you, I know that I didn't come here in vain. I didn't waste my time walking 1,400 miles and my 2 favorite pure-blooded horses. Now that I've seen you, I can finally confirm that I didn't come here in vain. You are indeed, as my father said. You are an outstanding expert." "Humph!" Auntie Sophia snorted. "You came all the way here just to look at me?" This young man bowed again. This time, his movements were even more respectful. "I was originally going to the west. However, before I left, my father told me to take a detour to Wildfire Town to pay you a visit. Respected Auntie Sophia, I bring my father's most sincere greetings," he said. "For an old friend like you, he originally wanted to personally pay you a visit. However, because everyone is well aware of the reason, it is not convenient for him to personally come. He could only ask me to pass on his greetings." Speaking up to this point, the young man paused for a moment before continuing. "In addition, my father also asked me to bring you a question." "Question?" Auntie Sophia curled her lips. "What question does that scoundrel of a father of yours have to ask me?" "My apologies. The following are my father's original words. He told me to pass them on to you without missing a single word." As he spoke, the young man straightened his body and raised his head. He looked at Auntie Sophia and coldly shouted, "Sophia, I heard that you chased away my soldiers in Wildfire Town. Are you planning to break the rule of not fighting with the secular world by doing this? I hope you don't try to touch my bottom line again. Otherwise, you should understand that I, more than anyone, want you guys to break the contract first." To be continued. If you want to know what happened next, please go to www.chidian.com. There are more chapters. Support the author. Support the original reading. Chapter 393. GOR Chapter 372. Sharp edge. The young man's words seemed to come out of nowhere. None of the customers in the quiet shop could understand what he was saying. Hearing his words, Aunt Sophia revealed what appeared to be a smile. Her smile was somewhat peculiar as she regarded the young man. "Ah, did your father send you here to denounce me?" "Humph, he should know that I do not like to look at other people's faces, not even your father. If he wants to denounce me, then he should come find me himself." Hearing Aunt Sophia's words, One-Eyed, who was seated in the middle of the shop, tossed away the violin in his hand. With a displeased expression on his face, he stepped forward and glared at the young man with his only eye. It was as though he was looking for trouble. When he was standing before the young man, he lowered his head and spat on the ground. The muscles on his face twitched as he rolled up his sleeves and shouted, "What are you doing here? Do you know what this place is? Are you looking for trouble? Do you know that this is my shop? No one in this town would dare to act presumptuously here." After saying that, he rolled up his sleeves as though he was about to step forward. One-Eye had only taken half a step forward when Aunt Sophia, who was standing behind the bar counter, had already appeared in front of him. She gently raised her hand and pressed down on her husband's shoulder, stopping One-Eye's movement. One-Eyed looked at his wife. Aunt Sophia had a gentle expression on her face as she looked at One-Eyed and said softly, "My dear, don't get involved in this matter. Let me handle it, all right?" Her tone was gentle. Hearing that, One-Eyed frowned slightly. He looked at the young man and asked his wife in a whisper, "Is it your old friends again?" Aunt Sophia pursed her lips into a smile and said in a whisper, "I am sorry, my dear. Tomorrow, I will cook your favorite mutton soup, all right? You don't have to worry about this matter. Pack up and go to the back to rest." After saying that, she gently pulled her husband over. One-Eyed hesitated for a moment before finally sighing. He then walked through a small door behind the counter. Sophia stood before the counter and looked at the customers inside the shop. At this moment, these guests were all looking over curiously. Auntie Sophia sighed, then smiled again. She clapped her hands and said with a smile, "All right, everyone, tonight's happy hour will end here for now. We have to leave in advance. Please pay for the drinks before you leave. Come back tomorrow. Hey, I'm talking about you, old buck. We still owe you for yesterday's drink." A dirty drunkard who had already sneaked to the door along the wall turned around and smiled embarrassedly. "If I owe you one more day, I'll pay you back tomorrow when I get the money." "Sigh, Aunt Sophia, it's not like you don't know that my wife is too strict." When everyone heard that, they all laughed. Then, they all put down their glasses. Some directly put a few coins on the table, some walked up to Sophia and put the coins in her hand. There were also some who carefully sized up the young man before they left. Then, they gave Sophia a look that said, "If you need help, just say the word." Then, they slowly left. After the people in the room left, the previously bustling shop suddenly became quiet. Only the table in the corner was left. Poor thing Adeline was still sitting there helplessly. She lowered her head. Seeing that everyone had left, she didn't know what to do. She wanted to leave with the crowd, but if she wanted to leave, she would definitely pass by that fellow. She was afraid that she would be recognized by him. But sitting here, after everyone left, she was the only one sitting in this huge shop. It was even more eye-catching. Finally, the young man's eyes fell on Adeline. When the young man saw Adeline clearly, he seemed to be startled at first. Then, the corner of his mouth twitched, revealing a strange smile. That pair of slender eyes narrowed into a line, flashing with an indescribable light. Auntie Sophia had already turned around and walked to Adeline's side. She gently pulled her up and said with a gentle smile, "All right, dear. If you're full, quickly go upstairs and rest. Your bedroom is the innermost room on the second floor. The door handle is a little rusty. If you push it hard, it will open. Rest early, my child. Quickly go." When she said the word quickly, Auntie Sophia's tone seemed to have a trace of undetectable complexity. Adeline hastily stood up. Grabbing her hat, she lowered her head and ran up the stairs of the shop. Finally, only Auntie Sophia and the young man were left in the lobby. "All right, now you can tell me why you're here." Auntie Sophia stretched her waist and muttered in a low voice, "Sigh, the members of the Hannigan family are all troublesome. I should have known that earlier." The young man continued standing there with a calm expression. He looked at Auntie Sophia and said, Why I'm here, could it be you can't guess? Sophia knitted her brows and looked at the young man. You? Could it be that damn trial task from your Hannigan family? How old are you? The young man pursed his lips. When he smiled, the smile on his face caused Sophia's expression to turn strange. Next, Auntie Sophia heard the young man smile and said, I am 31 years old this year. He had only answered Auntie Sophia's question about his age. He did not directly answer the first question. This meant that he had admitted it. 31 years old? Auntie Sophia was dumbfounded. Bloody hell! They really are a family of perverts. She looked at the young man and said, Back then, when your father took the trial task, he was only 4 years younger than you, right? For you to have such achievements at the age of 31, in the history of your Hannigan family, you can be ranked within the top 20. 14th, the young man said calmly. The young man's tone was very calm. Taking the trial at the age of 31. At that age, I can only be ranked 14th. But to me, this kind of ranking is meaningless. My father took the trial at the age of 27. At that age, he was only ranked 6th in the family's history. However, my father's final achievements and strength were the strongest in the history of the family. Thus, such a ranking is meaningless. Sophia looked at the young man and pursed her lips. Sure enough, you are as arrogant as Lao Tzu. Humph, when you smiled earlier, you looked just like Lao Tzu when he was young. If you don't have any arrogance, how can you challenge the strong? The young man's expression turned solemn, and he said in a deep voice, Continuously challenging the strong is an ancient tradition of my Hannigan family. It is by relying on this inheritance that our family can become stronger and stronger. Stubbornly like you, Lao Tzu. Auntie Sophia spread her hands. All right, you came for the trial task. How laughable. I am just curious as to why you came to my place. Could it be? The young man revealed a smile and said, Every generation of men in our Hannigan family will have to undergo a trial task after they reach adulthood. Only by completing the trial task will they have the qualifications to fight for the right to the throne. You should be very clear about this. As for the content of the trial, of course I know the content of the trial. Auntie Sophia's face turned serious and she stared into the young man's eyes. Isn't it just challenging a powerful expert? Challenging a powerful expert? Although Sophia's tone was filled with disdain, the content of the trial was already shocking enough. The content of the trial was to challenge a powerful expert. The Hannigan family, the imperial family of the divine Emperor Odin. For thousands of years, this was a cruel and perverted iron law that was so arrogant that it bordered on arrogance. Any prince who wants to participate in the fight for the right to the throne must first go through the trial and challenge a powerful expert. This perverted high standard ensured that the divine emperor of the Odin Empire, the emperor of each generation, would be among the strongest experts in the continent. I am just curious, why did you choose me instead of others? Auntie Sophia's expression became somewhat displeased, and she pointed at her own nose. Could it be that in your and Lao Tzu's eyes, I am the weakest among the strongest in the world? Yes. This honest and straightforward answer caused Auntie Sophia's expression to become even more strange. She stared at the young man. Are you sure? I am sure. Your damned Lao Tzu also thinks so? Auntie Sophia's eyes began to burn with anger. Unfortunately, yes. The young man's expression was still calm and unperturbed. Father once said it himself. In the battle 30 years ago, the 10 great experts joined forces to suppress Father and forced him to sign that agreement with you. In the past, there were as many experts as there were clouds in the continent, and there were many talented people. However, time has passed. After 30 years, some experts have withered away and the new experts may not be able to rise to the top. In addition, there are also some old people who are unable to make any breakthroughs. The last sentence was about me, wasn't it? Auntie Sophia snorted out of curiosity. Father said that among the experts today, the first one to catch his eye is, without a doubt, the Saint Roland Garros who lives in the ancient city of Babylon in the east of the continent. Father also said that Saint Roland Garros' talent and strength are the best he has ever seen in his life. It can be said that he is a lifelong rival. Apart from that, among the other experts on the continent, Lantis Sir Merlin has a wild and unrestrained personality. However, the more he has such a personality, the more he has been able to make breakthroughs. They haven't fought for 30 years, but Father believes that given Sir Merlin's temperament towards magic, his strength has increased by leaps and bounds. 30 years later, I'm afraid that he has long since broken through the realm of experts and entered the origin realm. There are also the 3 Grand Magi of the Byzantine Empire. I heard that Grand Magus Zealand passed away from illness over 10 years ago. It can be said that the continent has lost yet another expert. The remaining 2 Grand Magi, due to age, were already close to 70 years old. After 30 years, I'm afraid that they have aged even more. Even though their magic has become more profound, it's already quite good that their strength hasn't decreased too much. There's also that Mr. who lives in the southern part of the anarchic lands who calls himself the Sword Saint. However, Father disdained his swordsmanship in the past, saying that his temperament is too extreme. With such a temperament, his strength naturally increased rapidly when he was young, but he was too impetuous. His strength would probably reach its peak by the age of 50, and it would be very difficult for him to make any more breakthroughs. If he couldn't calm his heart and train, he would never be a true match for Father in this lifetime. Apart from that, Father also had his own evaluations of the various experts in the world, and finally, he mentioned you. What did he say about me? Aunt Sophia's face was stiff. The young man laughed leisurely. Do you really want to hear it? Nonsense. Aunt Sophia was displeased. She said coldly, since you've already said so much, how can I not continue to listen? Besides, I really want to know what that freak of a Lao Tzu of yours thinks of me. The young man seemed to sigh, then continued, when Father mentioned you, he felt very sorry for you. Sorry? Yes, sorry. The young man said seriously, when Father mentioned you, he said that in terms of intelligence and talent, you could be ranked in the top 3 of the human experts. You are second only to Father himself and that Lord Roland Garros. In particular, Father's evaluation of your intelligence is even higher than that of Sir Merlin. With your talent and intelligence, you should be one of the top 3 most powerful human beings in the world. It's just a pity. What's a pity? Aunt Sophia's face suddenly calmed down. It's just a pity. Well, Father said it like this. It's just a pity that those who are too smart like to take shortcuts when doing things. They always like to use shortcuts to achieve things that ordinary people can't do. But you must know that in this world, not everything can be shortcut. For example, perseverance are the most important things in cultivation. If you only want to take shortcuts, you may not be firm enough in your mind. If you don't have a firm and unyielding heart, no matter how smart you are, I'm afraid you won't be able to achieve anything truly great. For example, in the past, your strength could be ranked in the top 5 of the top 10 experts, but now, in the past 30 years, the other experts have continued to cultivate, but only you have lived in this wildfire town, leisurely passing your days in comfort. It's as if you have lost your drive and desire to pursue things. 30 years have been wasted in vain. Your strength. It's already not easy if you can still maintain your former level. As for improvement, there's no need to talk about it. Father even said that he had never heard of anyone who could close their eyes and sleep every day, pass their days leisurely, drink wine and bask in the sun, and become a peerless expert. When Aunt Sophia heard this, there wasn't any anger in her expression. Instead, she became calmer. She lowered her head and pondered for a moment. Suddenly, she let out a long sigh. There was a faint bitterness in the smile at the corner of her mouth. Not bad, not bad. Your Lao Tzu is right. Humph, although his words are a bit unpleasant, they are all true. For the past 30 years, I've been living too comfortably. I've even forgotten when was the last time I practiced martial arts. After 30 years, your father said that I am now the weakest expert in the continent. It's not an insult, it's the truth. The young man was stunned. He didn't think that Aunt Sophia would admit it so readily. Moreover, she looked a bit angry just now, but in the blink of an eye, the anger disappeared. It was as if his words had made her feel relieved. Unfortunately, although your father is right, I still have to say, he is still so arrogant and still so ignorant, so stubborn, so perverted. The young man frowned. Your Excellency, please don't insult my father. Insult? Ha 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 ha. Aunt Sophia laughed a few times. Even if Thor was standing in front of me, I would still say the same thing. You, Lao Tzu, have always been a perverted and arrogant person. His comments about the experts of the continent seem to be correct. But in his mind there is only cultivation, non-stop cultivation, how to make himself stronger, continue to become stronger, non-stop on the path of becoming stronger. A person's life is less than 100 years. Even if he is a strong expert, his lifespan is only a few decades longer than a normal person's. If a person came to this world and was like your father, from the moment he was sensible, non-stop cultivation, non-stop becoming stronger, every day, every night, every moment, it would be like using a whip to whip himself, incessantly urging himself to cultivate bitterly, unwilling to relax for even a moment. At the same time, his mind would constantly think about the other experts of the continent. Such a life, your father has been like this since he was sensible. After so many years, he has always been like this. Even if another 10 years, 20 years, or 100 years passed, as long as your father is still alive in this world, he will continue to live like this, forcing himself like this, torturing himself like this. The only thing he did when he came to this world was to cultivate. Cultivate for a few decades, cultivate for 100 years. But in the end, what? When the day comes that he dies, with a kick of his legs, won't everything turn into nothingness? No matter how strong you are, so what? To say something overboard, if a person lives like this, can he still be called a human? At this point, Sophia's tone gradually became sharper. That's right, I don't remember the last time I cultivated bitterly. These years, my life has been too comfortable and carefree. But, what right does your father have to make fun of me? So what if I don't remember the last time I cultivated bitterly? I want to ask, when was the last time your father truly laughed to his heart's content? When was the last time your father drank to his heart's content? When was the last time your father sang and jumped for joy? Every day, every moment, there is only the word strong in his mind. This kind of life is not fun at all. So what if he is number one in the world? Even if I am not as strong as him, I live happily every day. I have a husband who loves me and loves me. I have a group of friends to drink with without worries. I can laugh to my heart's content every night. I don't have to think about those annoying things. I lie in bed every day and fall asleep as soon as my head hits the pillow. When I wake up the next morning, there is a smile on my face. Has your father ever experienced such a life? Does he really understand? The young man. At the end of her speech, Sophia deliberately sighed. Life is truly boring if you live like him. I will say this. If the day comes that I die, I can be sure that many of my friends will shed tears for me. My husband will be truly hurt by my death. My friends will also reminisce about the happy days that we spent together. But what about your father? He is the respected divine Emperor Odin, the #1 expert of the human race in the continent. Humph, But I can guarantee that if the day comes that he dies, no one in this world will shed a tear for him. Even you, his sons, have long been turned cold by the perverted rules of the Hannigan family. You have lost your humanity." After Aunt Sophia said this, the young man fell into deep thought. He lowered his head and thought for a while. When he raised his head, he let out a long sigh. He looked at Aunt Sophia and smiled. "I admire you. Father said that your intelligence is rare in this world. I didn't believe him. Now that I see it, your wisdom is truly admirable. Garin is convinced." "Garin?" Aunt Sophia heard this. "Your name is Garin? Saul's eldest son, Garin?" The young man smiled bitterly. "Otherwise, do you think I am?" Aunt Sophia sighed and said indifferently, "I heard that among Saul's sons, his youngest son, Cuchulainn, is the most talented. As for the eldest prince, Garin, I have never heard of him having any outstanding areas. Even in the fight for the throne, he was vaguely threatened by Cuchulainn. If not for the support of some elders in the tribe, he would have been overthrown by Cuchulainn long ago. So you are the eldest prince, Garin. Today I see that you are not simple. I am afraid that you are even more powerful than Cuchulainn. It seems that those rumors have other inside stories." Pausing, Sophia narrowed her eyes and looked at Garin. "At such a young age, you know how to hide your strength and deliberately show weakness. It seems that the Hannigan family is the Hannigan family. In every generation there will be a few heaven-defying young geniuses." "Thank you for your compliment." Garin bowed. "I'm impressed by your wisdom. Just now, I purposely said my father's evaluation of you in order to disturb your mind. However, you just casually retracted your thoughts and were not moved by my words. You even said those words in return, but it almost made my own heart waver instead. The wise Sophie is indeed extraordinary." Sophia's face turned serious. "I no longer use the name Sophie. Now I am called Sophia. You little brat, don't call me by the wrong name again." Garin smiled and stood there, looking at Aunt Sophia. "I have traveled 1,000 miles to come here. You already know my goal. Then, can we begin? I'd also like to see the skills you used to make my father praise you so much. Are we going to make a move now?" Sophia smiled and lazily looked at the messy shop. "You see, I have such a big shop. Because of your arrival, I have chased away all the customers. Now, this mess needs to be cleaned up. Hey, if you want to make a move, you should at least let me collect the money for the wine on the table, right?" After saying that, Aunt Sophia rolled up her sleeves and pulled out a rag from the table. She walked to the side and wiped the tables one by one. Occasionally, she would even put the money for the wine that the customers had left on the table into her apron pocket. She casually did some chores in front of Garin, causing this Crown Prince Odin to be stunned. After Aunt Sophia finished wiping a table, she turned around to look at Garin. "If you want to make a move with me earlier, why don't you come up and help me? With two people working together, it will be faster." After saying that, she threw a rag over. Garin subconsciously reached out to catch it, but he was stunned. You have lived for so long. Have you never held a rag before? Sigh, I recognize the way you are holding the rag. This is your Hannigan family's Thunderroar sword technique. Poor child. First, must I finish all this before I can make a move? Until now, Garin had been able to maintain a calm demeanor in front of Sophia. However, at this moment, he finally showed signs of helplessness. Of course not. Aunt Sophia turned her head. I am not like you Hannigan family freak. Every day you are either training or training. I still have a business to do. I still have a big family to take care of. I still have to sell vegetables, cook, brew wine and settle accounts. You want to test yourself against me? Fine, then follow me. After 2 days, when I am free and am done with my business, I will naturally make a move against you. 2 days. Garin's face finally changed. So impatient. Aunt Sophia sneered. When you came in, your demeanor, and even your tone of voice were all very similar to your Lao Tzu. However, the traces of imitation were too strong, and there was a hint of falsehood. Moreover, it seems that your patience is much worse than your Lao Tzu's. Pausing, she laughed softly. If you want to challenge me and defeat me, I am afraid that your current strength is not enough. Even if you have peeked into the realm of the strong, how can you compare to us old fellows who have been immersed in cultivation for tens of years? Sigh. I understand now. The reason why your Lao Tzu wanted you to test yourself against me was not because I am the weakest among the competitors, but because only I can truly help you comprehend the essence of the test. As she spoke, she did not put down the rag in her hand. As she worked, she casually said, "Since you are able to challenge me, then I believe that your strength is definitely not ordinary. I am afraid that you already have the confidence to challenge me. However, the essence of the test is not simply about the strength of the battle. It is about the comprehension of the realm. Even if your strength surpasses mine, if your realm is not enough, then your future achievements will be very limited." Humph, that old fellow Thor, as expected, has some thoughts. He actually wants to use my family again. You said? Garen was stunned. Aunt Sophia's eyes seemed to be in a trance for a moment. She said softly, "Do you know how long your father used to train in the past?" Humph, a total of 26 months. The test is not for you to train your martial skills until they are tyrannical, then find a strong opponent and directly beat them to the ground. Instead, it is for you to continuously verify your realm with that strong opponent, hoping to learn something from it. In the past, your father and his opponent fought a total of 109 times. After losing 108 times, he finally won against his opponent in the last round. Only then was the test considered to have ended. However, the profound meaning of the realm that he learned was far more than the winning and losing of a single battle. The real thing that he learned was not the last time he won, but the 108 times he lost. Garen was somewhat surprised. "Father, the matter of the test that year, how did you know? How did I know?" Aunt Sophia seemed to smile, but this smile was bitter, as if it contained many deeper things within. "How did I know? Humph, what a ridiculous question." Aunt Sophia turned around and looked at Garen, "Because when your father was training, the entire process, I was at the side and witnessed it with my own eyes. Back then, I was much younger than you are now. The opponent that your father challenged was my father, the famous Thundercloud warrior of the Odin Empire. During the 26 months of your father's training, he lived in my house. How could I not know? Ridiculous." Garen was completely stunned when he heard this. Poor thing Adeline went upstairs in fear and trepidation. She ran to the door in the corner and pushed the door open. Sure enough, it was a clean room. But how would she dare to stay here at this moment? She recognized the young man who came in downstairs tonight. She remembered that when she was young, when she lived in the Odin Empire, she knew this young man. And there was also a frightening memory. When she entered the room, her whole body trembled. She immediately looked around for a way out and quickly pushed open the window. Below was the street outside. This building was not high. Adeline jumped down from the windowsill on the second floor. When she landed, she twisted her ankle a little. But she was afraid of alerting the person inside, so she did not dare to open her mouth and cry out in pain. She only limped and jumped up. She felt bitter in her heart. Her horse had been thrown to the shop assistant and was already in the backyard of the shop. If she wanted to go in and get the horse, she was afraid that she would alert that guy. Helplessly, she could only grit her teeth and give up on the horse. She grabbed her bag and limped quickly towards the town entrance. There was no curfew in Wildfire Town. In this lawless area, the town gates were not closed even at night. Adeline smoothly got out of the town gate. Only then did she relax a little. Without a horse, she could only brace herself and walk all the way north. She only hoped that she would meet a passing caravan on the way, and then buy a horse to ride. She walked all the way to the north, and entered the wildfire plains. She tried her best to hasten her journey. Even after walking for half a night, she still didn't encounter any pedestrians. Fortunately, it wasn't her first time here. Along the way, she thought of the last time she traveled together with Shea, and wasn't too afraid. After walking in the dark for an entire night, Adeline finally could not take it any more when it was almost dawn. She stopped outside a sparse forest. The food from last night had long been digested, and she was very thirsty. But she did not see any water source. Leaning against a tree and panting, Adeline could not help but think, "I won't meet that guy again, right? Sigh, that scary guy, why did he come to the south?" Just as she thought of this, she suddenly heard a voice that made her feel as if she had fallen into an ice cellar. "My poor little sister, why did you come here?" "Humph! Even though I knew you wanted to escape, you ran for an entire night and only managed to walk such a short distance. You are really useless." Adeline turned her head and saw Garin standing there less than 10 steps away. He was looking at her with a cold smile. You, Garin approached Adeline step by step. He frowned. "I was also very surprised to see you. But I still had important things to do. I already wanted to let you go last night, but I didn't expect that you would still be such a useless person. I gave you an entire night to run away, but you still let me meet you here." Garin walked in front of Adeline and reached out to pinch Adeline's chin. Adeline seemed to want to resist, but how could she be Garin's opponent? A useless person will always be a useless person. Garin stared into Adeline's eyes from a close distance. His eyes were cold, and there was even a trace of hatred. "This place is less than 5 li away from Wildfire Town. You spent an entire night and only managed to walk such a short distance? 5 li? How is that possible?" Adeline nearly cried out. She had been running for her life without resting for an entire night. How could she have only walked less than 5 li? However, when Garin saw the expression on Adeline's face, he immediately understood. He could not stop himself from laughing out. "I understand now. You must have been running in a panic during the night. There was no point of reference in the darkness and you took a detour. You ran for an entire night and thought that you were running in a straight line, but you actually ran in a circle. Ha ha ha." A useless person will always be a useless person. You have Byzantium blood flowing through your body. As expected, you are just as useless as the Byzantium people. Are you here to chase after me?" Adeline sighed. Are you so unwilling to let me go? So many years have passed, I have never done anything to let you down. Why must you?" "Humph, I have no intention of chasing after you." Garin's face suddenly turned strange. "Last night I already wanted to let you go. This morning I just came out. I did not expect to meet you here." This first Prince Odin was holding an axe in his hand. Could it be that you are here to chop wood?" Adeline looked at the axe in his hand. Clearly, this was not the battle axe used by the Odin warriors. It was just an ordinary axe used to chop wood. "Humph. So what if I am?" Garin frowned. "This is one of the contents of my training." After saying that, he coldly looked at Adeline and said, "You, on the other hand, are you thinking of going to the Odin town?" To be continued. If you want to know what happened next, please go to www.chidian.com. Support the author, support the original reading. Chapter 394. Gior Chapter 373 returned to town. Although Adeline had gone on an adventure with Shea in the wildfire plains, she had Shea, an experienced hunter, as her companion. Thus, there was no need for her to worry about anything else. What she did not know was that when humans were walking through the wilderness, It was very easy for them to take detours. That was especially true when it was night time or when there was a lack of reference object. This was because in many cases, you thought you were walking in a straight line, but in fact, you didn't know that you were walking in a curved path. As you walked, you would walk in an arc. Additionally, Adeline was rushing through the forest at night and was not familiar with the roads here. Thus, it was not strange for her to end up taking a detour. However, Jarlin's action of running to the outskirts of the forest early in the morning left Adeline puzzled. Trials? Jarlin's expression was clearly unnatural. It would appear that he felt embarrassed to be carrying an axe for chopping firewood. He quickly put on a stern face and stared coldly at Adeline. "Humph, you ran all the way here and headed north. Are you thinking of going to Odin?" "And I want to go back, go back?" Jarlin suddenly let out a wild laugh. He stared at the girl before him, his eyes filled with undisguised disgust and hatred. "Go back? What a joke! You actually used such a word? You are not part of Odin to begin with. What right do you have to use the word go back? If you want to go back, you should be heading south to Osgilla." Adeline's face turned gloomy. However, she did not refute him. Instead, she gave a soft sigh. "You are right. My home is indeed not in Odin. I am simply someone without a home. I cannot go to Osgilla. However, Odin is also not a place I should go." Jarlin narrowed his eyes and looked at Adeline. He seemed to be able to tell that Adeline was feeling disheartened, although he did not know why Adeline had become so dispirited. Jarlin, who deeply hated this girl, did not mind giving her a push at a time like this. "Humph, since you understand all that, why are you still heading north? Even if you return to Odin, no one will welcome you back. You are just a vile spawn. Just looking at you like this makes me feel deeply humiliated. You..." Jarlin was about to continue when he suddenly heard a gentle voice coming from behind him. "Enough, I asked you to chop firewood, not to come out early in the morning to bully a girl." The voice was benevolent and warm. Amidst the morning mist, the stout figure of Aunt Sophia walked over step by step. As she walked, she straightened her thick waist and her steps were somewhat laborious. She dragged her feet lazily across the ground. She looked no different from an ordinary village aunt. Most importantly, she held a strange-looking bucket in her hand. No, it would be more accurate to say that this item no longer looked like a bucket. In her hand was a large black object. She held it with one hand and the object on her palm was as tall as a person. It was circular in shape, black and large. This was simply a large water vat. Aunt Sophia held onto the water vat as she slowly walked over. There was a gentle smile on her face. Under Jarlin's watchful gaze, she walked to Adeline's side. She placed one hand on Adeline's shoulder and whispered with a smile. "Poor child dear. Why did you run away last night? Jumping out of the window in the middle of the night is not a good habit. Look at you, after one night outside, your body is covered in mud. Come back with me, I even made some breakfast. Your horse is still in the stable in the backyard. If you want to hurry back, you should at least eat your fill. It won't be too late to leave with the horse." Adeline was originally in a gloomy mood. After being hugged by Aunt Sophia, her gentle smile and warm eyes were cast upon her. Her originally cold heart was instantly filled with vitality. "Are you here to keep an eye on me?" Jarlin frowned as he looked at Aunt Sophia. "Your Excellency, I will not go back on my words. So, there is no need for you to." Aunt Sophia glanced at Jarlin and curled her lips. "Humph, you are just like Lao Tzu. You think too highly of yourself. Keep an eye on you? I don't have the time for that. Every morning, I come to this forest to get water. It is just a habit of mine for many years." She pointed into the forest. "There is a spring there. It is the best water source within a radius of tens of li. The water is sweet and of the highest quality. Every day, I have to bring a vat of water back. When I use this water to wash vegetables, It will be exceptionally sweet. It is even better if I use it to brew wine. Jarlin was stunned as he looked at the huge vat in Aunt Sophia's hand. It was even taller than a person. Such a huge vat. If it was filled with water, it would be at least 1,000 jin, right? This place was about 5 li away from Wildfire Town. Every day, she would carry 1,000 jin of water and walk 5 li. Could such a method be a special kind of cultivation? But, what kind of training was this? Training strength? Although this method was very frightening for ordinary people, for experts it was still too easy. Jarlin frowned as he looked at Aunt Sophia with a strange expression. Just by looking at your eyes, I know what you are thinking. Aunt Sophia bent down and put down the vat. She put her hands on her waist and stretched her body. You must be thinking, is this a special kind of training method? Am I right? She then snorted disdainfully. You guys from the Hannigan family are all lunatic. You can associate everything with cultivation. Let me tell you, this isn't a cultivation method at all. It's just that this old lady likes the taste of the water here, so I come here every day to bring a jar back for my own use. Sigh. I really don't know how you guys from the Hannigan clan live your lives. You can associate everything with training. I am afraid that when you eat or sleep, you will associate it with training. Apart from training, can your eyes not see anything else? Aunt Sophia raised her head and pointed at the sky. Look, the sun is so good. He took another deep breath and said, the morning air is so fresh. Sigh, it's such a good time to come out to fetch water and take a walk. I wandered from the town to here, fetched some water, and wandered back. Being alone under the morning sun, I can still breathe in such fresh air and look at the flowers and grass in the wild. My mind will be more cheerful. Even if there is something troubling you, something that you cannot figure out, you will be able to let go of it. At most, you will just have to face the sun and smile it away. After saying that, she glared at Jarlin. However, a kid like you will most likely not be able to understand this kind of situation. She looked at Jarlin. Jarlin frowned, seemingly thinking hard about Aunt Sophia's words. Aunt Sophia patted the water vat on the ground. Just as well. Now that I have you as a free laborer, I can save some energy, follow my instructions and chop up 100 bundles of firewood. Then, bring a vat of water back with you. Remember to be quick. I am still waiting to use the water to make lunch. When she said, bring a vat of water back, Jarlin could not help but roll his eyes. After saying that, Aunt Sophia had already pulled the somewhat sluggish Adeline. She affectionately hugged the long-legged girl's shoulder and led her all the way to Wildfire Plains. On the way, she seemed to be nagging, just like a kind country aunt. I say, such a beautiful girl, you can't casually walk at night in the future. It is not safe. Sigh, look at your face. It is as dirty as a cat's face. Go back and quickly wash it. You ran out of the window last night. You haven't taken a bath yet, right? I say, a young girl like you must love cleanliness. Otherwise, your husband will be angry in the future. Men don't like women who don't love cleanliness. Originally, Adeline's complexion was slightly better. However, when it came to the matter of her husband, her face suddenly became pale again. The shoulder that was hugged by Aunt Sophia also slightly trembled a few times. Aunt Sophia immediately understood. She glanced at Adeline and sighed in a low voice. Sigh, looking at your face, it seems like someone died in your family. And you ran out alone like this. I am afraid that if you didn't run away from home, then you are hurt by love, right? Adeline's eyes suddenly turned red. Aunt Sophia smiled and deliberately sighed loudly. Looking at your appearance, with your sad and miserable appearance, it is obvious that you did not just run away from home. I think that there is a man who hurt your heart, right? Adeline stared blankly for a moment. The image of a certain country bumpkin suddenly appeared in her mind. Her heart was tangled and she could not help but gently nod her head. The men in this world. Sigh, the men in this world, there are not many good things. Especially a beautiful girl like you have to be even more careful. We women only have one heart. We cannot let it be cheated away by any man. Once the heart is cheated away, it is not easy to find it back. Aunt Sophia patted Adeline's back and smiled generously. Then, she saw that Adeline's hair was a bit messy. She simply took off her headscarf and tied up Adeline's hair. She also tied it into a village woman's hairstyle. Poor child, don't run away by yourself again. That perverted kid looks like he doesn't like you. If you leave this old woman's line of sight, I'm afraid I won't be able to protect you. Sigh, what a poor child. Aunt Sophia did not know how many times she said, poor child, on the way back. She led Adeline all the way back to Wildfire Town. When they arrived at the entrance of the shop, Adeline followed Aunt Sophia into the shop. When she saw the scene inside, she was instantly stunned. What are you spacing out for? Aunt Sophia stood beside Adeline and smiled. Could it be that there is a tiger in here that will eat you? No. Here, here. Adeline pointed inside the shop and widened her eyes. Here, how could it be? Headache. I'll sleep first. I'll get up in the morning to make up for the word count. If you want to know what will happen next, please go to www.chidian.com. There are more chapters. Support the author. Support the original reading. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Nights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.